Hi guys. Tonight we step quietly into the edge of the American frontier where the day has finally loosened its grip and the world narrows to a single log cabin breathing in the dark. You're there now, standing just outside boots dusted with dry earth shoulders still holding the memory of work. The light is thinning. The air has that cooled metallic softness that arrives right before full night. You probably will not survive this in the modern sense, at least not comfortably, because nothing here is designed for ease. Still, that is part of why you came. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights and let the quiet begin to gather around you. You step closer to the cabin, and the first thing you notice is how small it truly is. From the outside, it looks almost temporary, like something meant to be argued with by wind and winter. Yet this kind of structure carried entire lives through the 1800s. A mainstream historical fact often noted in frontier records is that many homesteads began as single-room log cabins, built in just a few days, sometimes raised by neighbors in a single afternoon. There was no ceremony to it. Shelter mattered more than symmetry. You push the door inward and feel the hinge resist for a breath, then give. The sound is soft but distinct, a wooden complaint that announces your arrival to the dark. Inside, the air is warmer than expected. Not warm exactly, but held. The logs have learned how to keep yesterday's heat tucked inside their grain. You smell smoke first. Old smoke, the kind that has soaked into timber so deeply, it no longer smells like fire at all, only like time. The door closes behind you, and the outside world thins to a narrow seam of sound. Wind becomes a suggestion. Insects fade to a distant shimmer. You're now in the kind of silence that has texture. It presses lightly against your ears. It asks you to listen more carefully. You begin to understand that sleep here does not start in a bed. It starts in attention. You take in the low ceiling, the uneven logs stacked with care that was more practical than pretty. Chinking of clay and moss fills the gaps. Some of it has fallen away over the years, and you can feel thin fingers of cold searching through those spaces. Historians still argue whether early settlers preferred clay mud or lime mixtures, based on availability or long-term insulation. But everyone agrees the gaps were never fully sealed. A quirky detail often overlooked is that some families stuffed old rags, dried grasses, or even newspaper scraps into those cracks when winter deepened. It was not elegant, but it worked well enough to quiet the wind. You imagine hands doing that job by lantern light, not speaking much saving words for daylight. Your eyes adjust slowly. Firelight flickers from a small hearth, not blazing, just alive enough to glow. This is deliberate. Letting the fire die completely would invite cold that settles into joints and dreams alike. Keeping it too strong wastes precious wood. You begin to sense that every choice in this space is a negotiation. You move farther inside, boots dull against the packed earth floor. Some cabins had planks, but many did not. Dirt floors were easier to repair and warmer than bare stone. The ground under your feet feels firm, slightly springy, smoothed by years of footsteps. It holds the day's warmth longer than you expect. Your body starts to loosen. Not relax fully, just enough to stop bracing. Outside, the frontier stretches wide and indifferent, but inside the cabin compresses the world into something manageable. This narrowing is part of how sleep becomes possible. You notice the smell again, layered now. Smoke, yes, but also wool leather, maybe dried corn. There is a faint animal note too, not unpleasant, just honest. In many frontier cabins, livestock slept nearby or even inside during the harshest nights. Scholars still debate how common this truly was across regions, but journals and letters mention calves or chickens brought in for warmth, often enough to suggest it was not rare. You pause near the centre of the room and listen. The quiet is not empty. Wood ticks softly as it cools. Somewhere outside, a night insect starts and stops as if unsure whether to commit. These sounds are not background noise, they are information. Over time you would learn their meanings the way others learn clock faces. A mainstream historical observation from travellers in the 1800s is that frontier nights felt louder than cities, not because there was more sound, but because there was less distraction. With no engines, no distant hum, each noise arrived clean and unfiltered. You feel that now. Every sound feels closer than it should. Your shoulders drop another fraction. The day's labour still lingers in your muscles, a dull warmth behind the tiredness. Sleep here does not rush in. It circles first. It waits for you to prove you're done moving. You take in the simple furnishings, a table with uneven legs, a stool rubbed smooth by years of use, a bed frame made of poles fitted together with patience. The mattress is a tick stuffed with straw or corn husks. It looks thin, but you already sense it will shape itself around you more than you expect. There is something grounding about how little there is to look at. Modern rooms beg your attention. This one releases it. Your thoughts slow, not because you force them to, but because there is nowhere for them to go. You become aware of your breathing again. It sounds louder here, deeper. You hear it bounce faintly off the walls. You realize that in this place even breath feels like an action that matters. A lesser-known detail from diaries of westward settlers is that many people delayed lying down until the fire reached a certain quiet stage. They believed sometimes quite seriously that sleeping too early invited bad dreams or restless spirits. Whether superstition or simple habit, the pattern repeats across accounts in different regions. You wait with the fire. You watch the orange fade to red, the red to a gentle pulse. The room settles in response like an animal finding its resting position. Outside, the frontier night continues its slow rotation. Somewhere far off a coyote might call, or maybe just the wind bending through grass. You cannot always tell the difference at first. Learning that difference is part of surviving here. Historians still argue whether fear of predators was more psychological than practical for most settlers, but fear itself was undeniably present. You feel it lightly now, not sharp, just alert. It keeps you listening. It keeps you alive. As you stand there on the edge between movement and rest, you begin to sense how sleep in this place is not an escape. It is a skill. One learned through repetition, patience, and trust in small routines. Trust in the door latch. Trust in the fire. Trust in the quiet signals your body learns to read. The cabin seems to lean inward, holding its breath with you. The night presses gently against the logs, testing them, then easing back. This rhythm will repeat until morning. You're not lying down yet. Not quite. You're still arriving, still letting the day drain out through your feet, still allowing the world to narrow to this one dim room and the promise of rest waiting inside it. And as you stand there listening, breathing, letting your eyes grow heavy, you begin to understand something subtle. Sleep on the frontier does not begin when you close your eyes. It begins when you decide the world for now can be trusted to wait. You begin to notice how much thought went into where this cabin sits, even if no one ever said it out loud. Long before you arrived at this quiet moment, someone stood here during daylight, squinting at the land, testing the wind with a wet finger, listening. The spot was chosen with sleep in mind, even if survival came first. You can feel it now in the way the air moves gently instead of rushing in, how the cold seems hesitant to settle too deeply. The ground slopes just enough to let rain run away rather than pool. That matters more than comfort ever could. A cabin built in the wrong hollow could turn into a damp trap, its floor cold and breathing moisture all night long. A mainstream historical fact often noted in land claim records is that early settlers were advised to avoid low ground not just for flooding, but because stagnant air made nights colder and sickness more common. You shift your weight and sense the firmness underfoot. The earth here is slightly raised, packed by years of use. Even in darkness, your body seems to recognize that this place is stable. That recognition alone eases your shoulders. Outside, the wind slides along the cabin's sides rather than striking it head-on. You hear it curve and soften like water diverted by a stone. This was no accident. Many frontier builders oriented their cabins with the shortest wall, facing prevailing winter winds. Historians still debate how consistently this practice was followed across regions, but surviving homesteads suggest an intuitive understanding of airflow passed quietly from neighbour to neighbour. You imagine the original builder standing in this very spot, perhaps at dusk like this, testing how the wind speaks. No tools in hand, just listening. That kind of knowledge does not come from books. It comes from nights spent awake learning what wakes you and what lets you rest. A quirky detail buried in a few settler letters mentions that some families planted brush or stacked split logs on the windward side of the cabin during colder months. These rough barriers worked like primitive windbreaks, reducing drafts and softening sound. You picture that now, a ragged wall of branches outside catching the night before it reaches you. The air inside carries a faint steadiness, as though the cabin itself exhales slowly. You realize that sleep here depends as much on what stays outside as on what stays in. Distance matters. A few extra steps between the door and the open prairie can mean the difference between rest and constant vigilance. You move closer to the wall and place your hand against the logs. They feel cool but not cold. Each one holds a story of where it came from, cut nearby, dragged by hand or animal, lifted into place with effort that lingered in sore shoulders. The thickness of the logs is uneven but reassuring. Thicker walls meant slower temperature change, and slower change meant deeper sleep. There is a quiet logic to all of this that begins to slow your thoughts. You're not meant to fight the night here. You are meant to negotiate with it. You turn slightly and look toward where the door meets its frame. The gap beneath it is small but not sealed. A thin line of cooler air traces along the floor. Some cabins used a rolled cloth or animal hide to block that draft. Others simply accepted it. Scholars still argue whether settlers preferred airflow for smoke control or warmth for comfort, but the reality likely shifted with the season and the family. Your breath fogs faintly, then clears. The temperature is balanced on a narrow edge, cold enough to make you aware of your body, warm enough to let you forget it after a while. Outside, the land continues its own slow routines. Grass leans and lifts. A distant animal shifts position. You cannot see any of it, yet you feel surrounded by presence. Not danger exactly, just life continuing without concern for your rest. A mainstream historical note often overlooked is that many frontier cabins were built within sight of others when possible, even if far apart. This loose clustering provided psychological comfort more than real protection. Knowing someone else was out there changed how people slept. You sense that instinct now, the faint relief of imagined neighbours beyond the dark. Your attention drifts to the shape of the roof overhead. The pitch is shallow, designed to shed rain and snow just enough. Rain sounds different depending on the angle, and people learn those sounds intimately. Tonight there is no rain, only the suggestion of weather far away. Still, you find yourself listening for patterns, training your ear without trying. There is a subtle shift in how your body holds itself. Your jaw loosens. Your hands rest more heavily at your sides. This is the quiet moment before lying down, when standing still feels almost like floating. A lesser-known observation from frontier journals describes how people often lingered upright before sleep, leaning against walls or sitting on stools, letting their minds empty. Lying down too soon could make thoughts race. Standing allowed them to settle gradually. You're doing that now without realizing it. The cabin seems to approve. The wood creaks once softly as if adjusting around you. You feel less like a visitor and more like a piece placed carefully into a larger shape. Your senses begin to narrow. You no longer track every sound, only the nearest ones. The hush thickens, not heavy but protective. It wraps around your attention and slows it. You think briefly of the long day behind you of work done and decisions made, but the thoughts feel far away, already blunted at the edges. The frontier has a way of shortening memory at night. What matters is what keeps you warm, what keeps you safe, what lets you sleep. There is a strange comfort in knowing that millions before you learned this same lesson without naming it. They learned by feeling their way through evenings like this one. They learned by noticing which places let their shoulders drop and which kept them tense. Historians still argue whether early settlers consciously designed their living spaces for psychological comfort or whether it emerged naturally from trial and error. Standing here, you suspect the answer is both. Intention and instinct working quietly together. You take one slow breath deeper than the last. The cabin answers with stillness. Outside, the wind slides past again, softer this time, as if satisfied. You're ready now to move closer to rest. The space has been chosen. The night has been negotiated. The world beyond the walls has agreed, at least for a while, to keep its distance. And without rushing, without ceremony, you begin to turn inward, preparing for the next small rituals that lead towards sleep. You begin to notice the walls more closely now, not as boundaries, but as companions. Each log carries its own weight, its own quiet history pressed together in a way that feels both imperfect and intentional. The surfaces are uneven under your fingertips, ridged, where bark once clung smoother, where hands have brushed past again and again. These walls are not meant to be admired. They are meant to hold. A mainstream historical fact often mentioned in frontier accounts is that most log cabins were built using whatever trees grew closest, usually pine oak or cottonwood depending on the region. This meant no two cabins ever felt quite the same inside. The wood dictated the mood. Some rooms smelled sharp and resinous. Others carried a deeper, earthier scent. You can sense that individuality here, a personality shaped by forest and effort. Between the logs, you notice the narrow seams where chinking fills the gaps. Clay moss straw, sometimes ash. It was pressed in by hand, smoothed quickly, never meant to be perfect. You can see where time has pulled it away in places, leaving thin lines of darkness. Cold slips through there, not aggressively, just enough to remind you that the world outside is still present. You become aware of how those tiny drafts move. They do not rush. They wander slowly like curious fingers tracing the floor. When they brush your ankles, you instinctively shift your weight. This is part of the learning. You begin to map the room not by sight, but by sensation. There is something oddly comforting about these imperfections. A perfectly sealed space would feel unnatural here. The small leaks make the cabin feel alive breathing. Scholars still debate whether early settlers fully understood insulation principles or simply worked by trial and habit, but the results suggest an intuitive balance rather than precision. Your ears pick up faint changes in sound as air slips through the chinks, a soft whistle here, a hush there. Each gap sings differently depending on the wind. Over time, people learned which sounds meant nothing and which signaled a storm shift in direction. Tonight the tones are mild, almost conversational. You rest your palm flat against one log and feel its temperature. Cooler than your skin, warmer than the air. The wood holds heat, slowly, reluctantly releasing what the fire gave it earlier. This slow exchange is part of why cabins stayed livable long after flames died down. The walls themselves became quiet reservoirs of warmth. A quirky tidbit recorded in a few pioneer diaries mentions that children sometimes pressed their ears to the logs at night, convinced they could hear the forest breathing. Whether imagination or acoustics, the belief lingered. You almost try it now, leaning closer, half expecting a whisper of sap or wind travelling through grain. The surface smells faintly of smoke and sap. These scents blend into something steady and grounding. They tell your body that this is a place meant for staying, not passing through. Smell does that. It bypasses thought and speaks directly to memory, even borrowed memory like this. Your breathing slows without effort. The rhythm of the cabin begins to set your pace. In a modern room, silence often feels empty. Here, silence feels structured, held together by wood and shadow. You notice small variations in the logs. Some are slightly bowed. Others meet at uneven angles. The craftsmanship is practical, not ornamental. Every choice was made under pressure of weather time and fatigue. Yet there is care in it. The corners fit. The roof holds. That is enough. Historians still argue whether most frontier cabins were built to last or simply to endure until something better came along. Standing here, you sense that the builders likely did not separate those ideas. Lasting was a luxury. Enduring was the goal. A faint creak passes through the wall as the temperature shifts. It is not a warning sound, more like a stretch. Wood expanding or contracting in response to the cooling air. At first, such noises might have startled newcomers. Over time, they became part of the night's language. You begin to understand that sleep here involves learning a vocabulary of sounds and sensations. The snap of cooling logs, the whisper of a draft, the distant rustle beyond the wall. Each has its own meaning, its own emotional weight. You shift slightly, adjusting your stance, and the floor answers with a muted thump. The sound feels absorbed almost immediately. Packed earth and thick wood do not echo. They swallow noise. That too is part of the calm. There is a faint visual softness now as your eyes adapt fully to the low light. Edges blur. The room becomes less about shapes and more about volumes of darkness and glow. The fire's last embers paint slow, breathing shadows along the walls, making the log seem to rise and fall. In this half-light, the imperfections become comforting. A crooked seam, a knot in the wood, a small crack filled long ago with care. These details tell you that others have stood where you stand, noticing the same things, feeling the same quiet. A lesser-known observation from early travel journals notes that newcomers often slept poorly their first weeks on the frontier, not because of danger, but because their senses had not yet learned how to rest in such raw surroundings. Familiarity, not safety, was the key. You feel yourself crossing that threshold now. Your thoughts slow further, stretching out between breaths. The cabin no longer feels like an object you're inside, but a shell you share. The boundaries blur gently. You become aware again of the outside not as a threat, but as a presence pressing lightly against the walls. Wind touches one side, then moves on. Somewhere far off, something shifts and settles. You do not need to identify it. Your body simply notes it and lets it pass. The quiet deepens. Not silence, but a deeper layer of sound beneath sound. A kind of hush that feels earned. You realize that these walls, with all their gaps and roughness, are doing their work. They are slowing the world enough for sleep to find you. They do not shut everything out. They filter. As you stand there, letting your awareness soften, you feel ready to move closer to where you will lie down. The room has finished introducing itself. The logs have told their story in texture and temperature and sound. You carry that understanding with you now, a gentle trust in the structure around you as you prepare to take the next small step toward rest. The light is the next thing you notice, or rather the way it is slowly withdrawing from the room. It does not vanish all at once. It thins. It softens. It pulls itself inward toward the hearth like an animal curling up for sleep. You stand there watching how shadows stretch longer, how edges blur, how the cabin begins to belong more to night than day. Firelight is not bright in the way modern light insists on being. It flickers with intention. It leaves corners untouched. In the early 1800s, illumination after sunset depended almost entirely on flame, and period household records frequently mention how carefully families rationed light-producing materials. Candles, tallow dips, and oil lamps were used sparingly, often only for specific tasks, never wastefully. You feel that restraint in the air now. The fire itself is low, its flames reduced to small tongues licking at half-burned logs. Each movement sends a brief pulse of amber across the walls. The effect is gentle, almost hypnotic. Your eyes follow the glow without effort the way they might follow waves on a shore. This is light meant to guide you downward into rest, not pull you awake. A faint smell of animal fat lingers, subtle but unmistakable. Tallow candles were common on the frontier, made from rendered beef or mutton fat. They burned unevenly and smoked more than later wax candles. Some people disliked their scent, but over time it became associated with safety and evening routines. You can almost imagine someone pinching a wick earlier, trimming it carefully, so it would burn longer through the night. One little-known detail from domestic journals of the era notes that many families timed their evening chores around how much light remained rather than the hour itself. Washing hands, checking the latch, saying quiet words to one another, all happened as the glow dimmed to a certain level. Like not clocks governed behaviour. You feel that rhythm now. As brightness fades, your movements slow without instruction. You become more deliberate, more economical. There is no reason to rush. Nothing demands your attention loudly enough to compete with the fire's soft pulse. The shadows deepen along the edges of the room. They are not threatening. They are simply undefined. Your eyes stop trying to name every shape. Instead, they accept suggestion. A chair becomes a darker patch. A beam becomes a line of deeper night. This surrender is part of the process. Some historians propose that pre-electric lighting shaped human sleep more than we realize, encouraging longer periods of calm wakefulness before rest. You sense that truth in your own body now. You're not tired yet exactly. You're easing toward tiredness like lowering yourself into warm water. A flicker catches your attention. One of the embers shifts, releasing a brief sparkle. Tiny points of light rise and vanish. You follow them with a faint curiosity, then let them go. Your thoughts do the same, lifting briefly before dissolving. You notice how the fire sounds different as it settles. Earlier it crackled sharply, now it breathes. A soft tick here, a gentle sigh there. These sounds mark time in a way that feels older than language. You do not count them. You let them pass through you. The cabin grows dimmer by degrees. Your pupils widen. Shapes soften further. The boundary between what you see and what you imagine grows thin. This is where stories used to live in the half-light passed quietly, so as not to wake children or disturb the calm. Accounts from frontier families sometimes mention evenings spent in near darkness, speaking softly, or not at all, conserving both fuel and energy. Silence was not awkward. It was practical. You feel that practicality settle over you now like a shawl. The warmth near the hearth is uneven. One side of your body feels gently heated while the other cools. You shift slightly, instinctively seeking balance. This small movement feels significant, as though you are negotiating a truce between heat and cold. There is a moment when the fire seems to pause, as if deciding whether to continue burning or fade into embers. You sense that decision, though nothing dramatic happens. It simply continues quietly. That steadiness is reassuring. A lesser-known observation from early settler letters describes how people often learn to read the fire's future by its colour. Bright yellow meant lively. Deep orange meant lasting. Pale blue hinted at the end. You glance at the glow now and feel satisfied. It will last a while longer. Your thoughts begin to stretch, lengthening like shadows themselves. Memories surface gently without edges. The day's work feels far away, almost belonging to someone else. Your body remembers effort, but your mind is already drifting toward stillness. You notice how the darkness outside presses closer to the window if there is one turning it into a mirror. You catch the faintest reflection of movement, perhaps your own, perhaps just firelight shifting. The glass holds both worlds at once, inside and out. Some researchers suggest that humans once experienced a more fluid boundary between waking and sleeping, especially in low-light environments. Rather than switching off, the mind drifted in stages. You feel yourself entering one of those stages now. The fire drops another small ember. A quiet sound follows. You breathe out slowly, matching its pace. Your chest rises and falls in an unhurried rhythm. The cabin seems to respond. The walls no longer feel like barriers, but like arms holding the space steady. The air grows thicker with warmth and stillness. Even the faint drafts seem to soften as though tired themselves. You realize you're no longer standing fully alert. Your weight leans slightly. Your posture loosens. The idea of sitting or lying down feels less like a decision and more like a natural continuation. Before you move, you take one more moment to absorb the light as it is now. Low, gentle, almost ceremonial. This is the threshold between doing and resting, between watching and dreaming. In this glow, time stretches. Past and present blur. You could be anyone in any year standing in a small wooden room as night claims its place. That universality settles. You makes your own worries feel smaller, less urgent. You let your gaze soften completely. The fire no longer demands attention, simply exists steady and patient. You trust it to keep watch for a while longer, and with that trust something inside you loosens. The night has accepted you. The light has done its work. You're ready to move deeper into the quiet that waits just beyond this moment. The first thing you notice once the light has softened is the soundscape opening up around you. Not louder, just clearer. With sight stepping back, your hearing steps forward, attentive and patient. The cabin does not fall silent. It reveals layers. Each sound seems to arrive with intention, as though announcing itself gently before passing on. Outside, the night breathes. Wind threads through grass in slow pulses. Somewhere farther out, something small shifts its weight, then goes still again. You cannot tell what it is, and you do not need to. On the frontier, learning to live with uncertainty was part of learning to sleep. Period journals often mention how newcomers were struck by the intensity of nighttime sounds in open country. Without streets or machinery, even subtle noises travelled far. A footstep, a cough, the scrape of bark could feel amplified. You sense that amplification now not as danger, but as awareness. Inside the cabin, sound behaves differently. It softens as it touches wood. Your own breathing becomes part of the room's rhythm. You hear it echo faintly, then disappear, absorbed by walls that seem to drink noise rather than reflect it. A faint popping comes from the hearth as a log settles. The sound is dry and brief, like a knuckle cracking. It startles you only for a second before you recognize it as harmless. Over time, people learned these sounds the way sailors learn waves. Each had a meaning, or at least a mood. Some accounts from the 1800s describe how settlers could tell the temperature drop by listening to how their cabin sounded. As wood cooled, it spoke more often. The pops and ticks were not random, but responsive. You find yourself listening for patterns not consciously, but with a growing ease. Beyond the walls, insects resume their nighttime work. Their rhythm is uneven, rising and falling in small waves. Crickets pause, then begin again as though checking in with one another. This living pulse fills the gaps between larger sounds, stitching the night together. A lesser-known note from rural diaries mentions that people sometimes judged the hour by insect activity, rather than by clocks. Certain rhythms suggested early evening, others meant the night had deepened. You cannot name which stage this is, but you feel that it is not yet late. There is still a long quiet ahead. Your ears catch a softer sound, now almost imagined. The faint brush of air against the cabin's outer surface. Wind does not roar tonight, it glides, it tests edges. When it finds a crack, it whispers through, then moves on. Each whisper is slightly different, shaped by angle and gap. You begin to distinguish between the sounds that belong to the cabin and those that belong to the land. The cabin sounds feel close, contained, personal. The land sounds feel wide, stretched thin across distance. This distinction becomes comforting. It tells you where you are. Some historians have suggested that people in pre-industrial settings developed a kind of auditory literacy, an ability to read sound as information. Listening was not passive. It was a skill practiced nightly. You sense that skill waking gently in you now. A creak comes from somewhere above, perhaps a roof beam adjusting as the temperature drops. You pause, then relax when it does not repeat. These small noises once caused unease for newcomers, but familiarity turned them into reassurance. A house that makes noise is a house that still holds together. Your breathing slows to match the pace of the room. Each inhale feels cooler than the last. Each exhale warms the air just in front of your face. You become aware of how quiet your own movements are, how carefully you shift your weight. Far away an animal calls. The sound is long and low, then gone. It does not echo. It doesn't repeat. You let it pass without labeling it. Naming it would pull your mind outward again. Instead, you allow it to remain part of the night's texture. A small, easily overlooked detail found in some frontier letters mentions that people learn to sleep through most animal sounds, but woke instantly to silence. A sudden absence meant change. Tonight the sounds continue. That continuity reassures you more than noise ever could. Inside the cabin, the air feels layered. Warm near the hearth, cooler near the floor, neutral in between. Your body finds the middle naturally. You sense where comfort lives and adjust without thinking. The rhythm of the night settles further. Your thoughts slow and lengthen like shadows stretching across the floor. You're no longer scanning for meaning in every sound. You're letting them pass through you like water around a stone. The idea of danger feels distant, now abstract. What remains is awareness without tension, alert but not alarmed, present without effort. This balance was essential to frontier sleep, a kind of gentle vigilance that did not exhaust the mind. Some researchers describe this state as a learned calm developed through repetition rather than instruction. You feel that truth in your body. You're not forcing yourself to relax. You're remembering how. Another sound rises briefly, perhaps a branch settling or an animal shifting its weight. It fades quickly. You do not follow it with your thoughts. Your attention drifts back inward toward warmth and stillness. The cabin seems to hold its breath with you. Even the fire has grown quieter, its glow steady and low. Shadows barely move now. The room feels suspended in a long pause. You sense that this listening, this gentle awareness is part of the ritual of sleeping here. It is how the day finally loosens its grip, how the mind learns that it does not need to stay sharp forever. Your eyelids grow heavier, not closing yet, but preparing. The sounds around you blend into a single low presence, a living hush. You are no longer trying to understand it. You are letting it carry you. Your attention drifts next toward the door, not out of fear, but out of habit. On the frontier, the door was more than an entrance. It was a boundary, a decision, a promise that the night would stay on its side while you stayed on yours. You stand close enough now to notice its weight, how solid it feels, even in the low light. The wood is thick, heavier than it looks. It had to be. Period building notes often mention that doors were made from the sturdiest boards available, sometimes thicker than the walls themselves, because replacing a broken door in winter was no small matter. You can sense that intention here in the way the door resists movement and settles firmly into its frame. Your hand brushes the latch. It is simple, functional, shaped by use rather than decoration. Iron or wood, it does its job without ceremony. You feel the faint coolness of it against your skin. That small touch carries reassurance. The door is closed, properly closed. That matters more than it sounds. Many frontier households developed specific habits around securing the door at night. Some accounts describe a quiet routine of checking the latch once, sometimes twice before rest. This was less about fear and more about ritual, a signal to the body that the day was finished. You sense that meaning now as your fingers leave the latch. A lesser-known detail from settlement letters mentions that some families wedged a wooden bar or heavy object against the door, not expecting trouble but simply to prevent it from rattling in strong wind. Noise, not intrusion, was often the greater concern. A rattling door could still sleep more effectively than any imagined threat. You listen closely. The door holds steady. No creak, no tremor. The wind tests it briefly, then slides away. The quiet that follows feels earned. Your awareness widens just enough to include the small space around the door. The threshold bears scuffs and worn marks, evidence of countless crossings. Boots, bare feet, children darting in and out. Each mark is a memory pressed into wood. You stand where many have stood, pausing in the same way before surrendering to rest. Some scholars suggest that thresholds carried symbolic weight in early rural life, representing a line between chaos and order, wilderness and shelter. You feel that symbolism without needing to name it. On one side, the open world. On the other, a space shaped by human hands and habits. You step back slowly, letting the door recede into the background of your awareness. It does not demand attention anymore. It has done its work. The boundary is set. Your ears adjust again, recalibrating now that the door is settled. The soundscape softens further. Wind becomes a low murmur. Insects blend into a distant shimmer. The cabin seems to exhale, relieved of movement. You notice how your shoulders drop another fraction. Muscles that held quiet tension finally loosen. This is the moment when vigilance eases into trust. Not complete trust, but enough. A subtle smell rises as the air stills. Wood ash, a trace of earth carried in on boots earlier. Scents mingle and settle, becoming the cabin's signature. Smell has a way of anchoring you in place, more firmly than sight or sound ever could. There is a curious calm that comes from knowing the door will not open again until morning. Even if nothing would happen, the certainty itself is soothing. Your mind no longer needs to anticipate interruptions. Historical accounts sometimes note that families preferred to finish all necessary tasks before dusk, so that once the door was closed, it stayed closed. Night was for rest, not errands. You feel that rule settle over you now, gentle but firm. The fire gives a faint shift, a soft murmur of movement. Its glow reflects weakly on the door's surface, tracing grain and small imperfections. Each mark tells of age, of seasons passing, of hands pushing and pulling through years. You find yourself standing very still, aware of your breathing again. Slow in, slow out. The rhythm feels natural, unforced. Your body seems to recognize that it is safe enough to let go. The outside world grows quieter still, or perhaps your attention simply turns inward. The boundary holds. Whatever moves beyond it keeps its distance. There is a sense of enclosure now that is not confining but comforting, like being wrapped in a thick coat against the cold. The cabin's small size begins to feel intentional, protective. You notice that your thoughts have thinned. They arrive less often, and when they do, they drift through without catching. You're no longer evaluating the space. You are inhabiting it. A faint memory surfaces, not your own, but borrowed from the countless nights others have spent like this. The quiet pause before lying down. The moment when the world feels balanced, neither demanding nor threatening. Researchers studying early domestic routines have pointed out that evening rituals helped regulate emotion long before modern concepts of relaxation existed. You're participating in that lineage now, even without knowing the steps. The door remains still, the latch holds, the night accepts the arrangement, your body leans subtly toward rest. The idea of sitting or lying down no longer feels like a decision. It feels like the next natural movement, as inevitable as the fire settling into embers. You take one last slow breath while standing, filling your lungs with the cabin's calm. The air feels steady, dependable. Then without hurry you begin to turn away from the door, carrying with you the quiet assurance that it will keep doing its job while you do yours, which now is simply to rest. The smell of the cabin grows more noticeable as everything settles into stillness. Not stronger, just clearer. Without movement stirring the air, each scent takes its place and stays there layered gently like fabric folded one piece at a time. You breathe in slowly and recognize the mixture before you can name it. Wood smoke softened by hours, dry timber, a trace of earth carried in on boots, something faintly animal warm rather than sharp. Accounts from early settlers often mention how smell became one of the most reliable ways to read a space at night. In darkness, when vision offered little help, scent told stories. A sour note could mean dampness. A sharp edge could mean spoiled food. A warm, steady smell meant the cabin was holding its balance. You sense that balance now, and it eases you without explanation. The fire contributes its own quiet signature. Even as the flames fade, the scent of burned wood lingers rounded and calm. It does not sting your nose. It feels settled, like a memory rather than an active presence. You imagine how many evenings this same smell has marked the transition from work to rest, from noise to hush. There is also the softer presence of fabric. Wool carries its own weight in the air, slightly sweet, slightly dusty. Blankets, coats, and garments absorb the day and release it slowly at night. Some frontier letters describe how people could tell whose coat hung where simply by smell alone. You smile faintly at the thought, sensing how intimate this world was, how closely life pressed together. A small, easily overlooked detail from household journals notes that many families aired their bedding during daylight whenever possible, not only for cleanliness, but to refresh its scent. Sun and wind were trusted more than soap. You imagine that practice now, the way smells were managed through habit rather than products. As you stand quietly, the air seems to settle deeper into your lungs. Each breath feels slower than the last. The coolness carries calm instead of chill. Your body adjusts without instruction, finding a rhythm that matches the room. There is a subtle sweetness beneath the smoke, perhaps from stored corn or dried herbs hung nearby. Many cabins kept small bundles of plants suspended from beams meant for cooking or simple remedies. Some were chosen for their scent as much as their use. People believed certain smells encouraged rest or kept bad dreams away. Whether or not that was true, the belief itself carried comfort. Interpretations differ on how widespread these practices were, but scattered references suggest that scent held quiet importance in daily life. You can feel why. Smell works quietly, directly bypassing thought. It anchors you in the present moment without effort. Your attention drifts to how the air feels against your skin. Not cold, not warm, but balanced. The fire has done its work well. Heat rises and gathers near the ceiling, then slowly drifts down. This gentle circulation creates a soft envelope around you. You're inside a pocket of steadiness. The cabin no longer feels like a structure you entered. It feels like a condition you are part of. The smells, the warmth, the stillness all blend into one sensation that is difficult to separate into parts. You notice that your breathing has deepened. Each inhale seems to reach further, filling your chest and then easing out without effort. There is no rush, no need to regulate or correct it. Your body remembers how to do this on its own. Outside, something shifts faintly. Perhaps a breeze brushing the walls. Perhaps a small animal passing through the grass. The sound barely reaches you, softened by wood and distance. It does not carry urgency. It simply exists, then fades. A number of early travel accounts mention how settlers learned to distinguish between smells that belonged inside and those that did not. Smoke and wool meant safety. Damp rot or sharp decay meant trouble. You realize now that you're unconsciously performing the same assessment, finding reassurance in what you sense. The air here feels clean enough, stable enough. Your shoulders drop another small amount. You didn't realize they were still raised. Your thoughts grow looser, less structured. Images drift through without attaching to words. A flicker of firelight. The curve of a log. The suggestion of night beyond the walls. Each impression arrives and leaves quietly. You begin to understand how scent could guide memory across generations. Even now, certain smells can pull people backward in time without warning. Here, surrounded by these simple elements, you're stepping into a shared sensory past. Some scholars have pointed out that in environments like this, smell functioned almost like a clock. As the fire died down, its scent changed. As night deepened, the air cooled. People sense these shifts instinctively. You feel one of those shifts now, subtle but unmistakable. The cabin feels more enclosed but not confined, protected rather than trapped. The air inside has a thickness that suggests containment. You are held within it. You take another slow breath. The exhale seems longer this time, as if your body's practicing letting go. Thoughts soften further. The edges of your awareness blur slightly. There is a quiet pleasure in noticing these small details without needing to act on them. No task follows, no decision waits, you are simply observing. A gentle warmth lingers near your hands and face. It comes from the fire's last effort from stored heat in wood and earth. That warmth feels personal somehow, as though it recognizes you. In older accounts, people sometimes described a house as having a mood, a good mood or a bad one. Tonight this place feels settled, content, ready for rest. You sense that mood wrapping around you. Your posture shifts almost on its own, easing toward where you will soon lie down. You are not there yet, but the direction is clear. Gravity begins to feel like an invitation rather than a pull. The world beyond the cabin fades further into abstraction. You know it exists, but it no longer demands attention. What remains is this enclosed pocket of warmth, scent and quiet. Your breathing slows again, your jaw loosens. Your hands rest more heavily at your sides. You feel yourself sinking into the rhythm of the space. Without any clear moment of change, you realize you're ready to move on, to let the next small ritual carry you closer to sleep. The cabin has prepared you gently and without hurry. You begin to notice the bed now, or what passes for one here. It waits quietly along the wall, unremarkable at first glance, almost humble. Yet the longer you look, the more intention you sense in its placement. It sits where drafts are weakest, where warmth lingers longest, where the night feels least intrusive. This positioning was rarely accidental. Period household notes often indicate that beds were arranged only after careful observation of airflow and temperature over several evenings. The frame is simple, made from sturdy poles or rough boards fitted together with practical skill. Nothing ornamental draws the eye. Its value lies in function. It holds weight. It endures. You can tell by the slight sag in the middle that it has done so many times before. On top rests a mattress in name only. A tick filled with straw-dried grass or corn husks stitched closed and laid flat. It looks thin by modern standards, but you sense that it will give more than expected once you settle into it. The filling shifts and shapes itself to the body, creating a shallow cradle rather than a cushion. Accounts from the early 19th century often mention that such bedding required regular maintenance. The filling had to be replaced or fluffed, especially after damp seasons. People learned to read the feel of their mattress the way one might read the weather. You imagine hands opening seams, shaking out old straw, refilling it under open sky. A small, easily missed detail from personal letters of the time notes that some families preferred corn husks over straw because they resisted flattening longer and produced a faint, pleasant rustle when moved. You listen closely now and almost imagine that sound waiting for you. The bed is not tall. You do not climb into it so much as step down into it. This low height keeps warmth closer to the floor where cooler air gathers but does not fully settle. It also makes rising in the night easier a practical concern when darkness rules. You move closer, aware of how your body anticipates rest. Muscles respond before you consciously decide. There is a subtle relief in knowing that the day's labour has a place to release itself. Nearby, folded blankets rest in a modest stack. They are thick, uneven, and heavy with use. Wool, likely spun and woven close to home, carries a faint lanolin scent. Some blankets may contain patches, mismatched squares sewn in without concern for appearance. Their purpose is warmth, not beauty. Records from rural households suggest that blankets were prized possessions often listed carefully in inventories. Losing one to damp or fire was a serious setback. You feel that value in the way the fabric seems to hold its shape resilient and dependable. You lift one corner slightly and feel its weight. It is heavier than expected, dense with warmth. This is not the kind of covering that floats. It settles. It presses gently, reassuringly against the body. There may also be a quilt thinner but softer, pieced together from scraps of worn clothing. Each piece carries a faint memory of use. A sleeve, a hem, a faded square once part of a dress. The quilt is history stitched into warmth. Some researchers point out that quilts often served as records of family life, marking births, losses, and seasons through fabric choices. Even when that symbolism was unintentional, it remained embedded in the cloth. You feel that layered past in the uneven texture beneath your fingers. The pillow is modest, perhaps little more than a sack filled with feathers or rags. It offers minimal lift. Your head will not sink deeply into it. Instead, your neck will find its own balance, encouraged to rest rather than collapse. A subtle scent rises from the bedding, a mix of clean fibre and lingering smoke. It is not perfumed. It is honest. It smells like use and care repeated over time. You pause beside the bed, taking in its simplicity. There is no illusion here of luxury. Comfort is earned through familiarity, not abundance. Yet there is a quiet confidence in this arrangement, a sense that it has served well and will continue to do so. Some commentators have observed that frontier sleeping arrangements encouraged a different relationship with rest, one less about escape and more about recovery. Sleep was not a retreat from life, but a necessary pause within it. You feel that framing settle gently in your thoughts. Your body begins to mirror that idea. Tension loosens without instruction. Your shoulders slope downward. Your breath slows again, deeper this time. The room seems to narrow its focus to this single spot. The rest fades slightly as though giving you privacy. The firelight barely reaches here, but enough glow remains to soften edges and reassure. You become aware of how quiet your mind has grown. Thoughts no longer arrive in clusters. They come singly, drift and dissolve. There is space between them now. You reach out and touch the edge of the bedding. The texture grounds you. It is rougher than modern fabric, but warm, familiar in its own way. It invites contact rather than promising indulgence. A faint creak sounds as the frame responds to your proximity. It is not a complaint, just an acknowledgement. Wood recognizing weight, preparing to receive it. You pause one last moment, standing at the edge of rest. The air around you feels settled, supportive. The night outside has receded into background presence. Inside, everything seems aligned towards stillness. Without urgency, without ceremony, you prepare to lower yourself down, trusting that the simple arrangement before you will hold you through the long hours ahead. You ease yourself down onto the bed, slowly at first testing how it responds. The frame gives a soft, muted sound, not a complaint, more like acknowledgement. The mattress yields under your weight in a gradual way, settling rather than sinking. It reshapes itself around you, finding a balance between support and give. Your body registers the change, immediately releasing a quiet breath you did not realize you were holding. The surface feels uneven in small ways, but not uncomfortable. The stuffing shifts subtly, creating shallow hollows where your hips and shoulders rest. This unevenness encourages stillness. Once you find a position, you're inclined to stay there. Movement feels unnecessary, even wasteful. Period descriptions of frontier sleeping often note that people learn to adapt their bodies to what was available, rather than expecting their surroundings to adapt to them. Comfort was something cultivated internally as much as externally. You sense that adjustment happening now, a gentle recalibration of expectations. You pull one of the heavier blankets over yourself. Its weight settles across your chest and legs, grounding you. The fabric traps warmth almost immediately, creating a pocket of retained heat that begins to spread. The sensation is subtle, but deeply reassuring, like being gently held in place. There is a soft rustle as the blanket shifts. The sound is muted, quickly absorbed by the room. You notice how quiet even small movements are here. Nothing echoes, nothing startles. The cabin seems designed to swallow excess noise and leave only what matters. Your head rests against the pillow, which compresses slightly and then stops. It does not cradle so much as support. Your neck adjusts, finding an angle that feels stable. This position feels different from modern beds, more deliberate, as though your body must participate in finding comfort rather than passively receiving it. Letters from the 19th century occasionally mention that people slept more still than we do now, partly because moving too much disturbed others sharing the space. Even when alone, that habit remained. You feel that restraint gently guiding you towards stillness. The air around your face feels cooler than the air beneath the blanket. This contrast is soothing. Each breath draws in freshness and releases warmth. The rhythm becomes steady, predictable, calming. Some observers of early domestic life have suggested that sleep in this period often came in phases with lighter rest, before deeper sleep arrived later. You sense that you are in that first phase now, hovering on the edge, not yet fully gone. Your hearing sharpens briefly, then softens again. You catch the faintest creak from the building as wood adjusts to your weight. The sound passes without consequence. You no longer interpret it as a signal. It is simply part of the environment acknowledging your presence. Outside, the night continues its slow motions. You do not try to identify sounds anymore. You accept them as part of a larger, steady pattern. The world feels less divided into inside and outside, more like a continuous field of quiet. There is a subtle awareness of others who might share this space in other times or places. Family members sleeping nearby. Children curled close. Perhaps a guest resting near the hearth. Even if you are alone now, the room carries the memory of shared rest. Some historical accounts describe how families slept in close proximity not only for warmth, but for reassurance. Darkness was easier to face together. You feel a trace of that reassurance lingering in the air even in solitude. Your thoughts begin to stretch and thin. They no longer line up in neat order. Instead, they drift overlapping gently. Images appear without context and fade just as easily. The boundary between thinking and dreaming grows softer. The blanket rises and falls with your breathing. You notice how steady it has become. Each breath is slower than the last. Your chest lifts and settles in a calm, predictable rhythm. A faint warmth spreads through your limbs, starting at your core and moving outward. Your hands, once slightly cool, begin to feel heavier and more relaxed. Your feet settle into stillness beneath the blanket. You're aware of the mattress beneath you, but it no longer demands attention. Your body has accepted it. The slight irregularities no longer register as discomfort. They are simply part of the landscape supporting you. There is a quiet satisfaction in this acceptance. No adjustments remain to be made, no tasks remain undone. The day has closed itself gently around you. Some researchers have noted that pre-industrial sleep often involved a deeper awareness of bodily sensations, at first followed by a gradual fading of that awareness. You feel that transition beginning now, like a tide slowly turning. Your eyelids grow heavier. You do not force them closed. They lower in their own time, pausing halfway, then drifting shut completely for a moment before fluttering open again. The rhythm feels natural, unhurried. The room remains present even as your focus narrows. You are aware of warmth, of stillness, of a sense of being held in place by wood fabric and quiet. Breath after breath, the world simplifies. Sounds blur together, sensations soften, thoughts lose their edges. You're not asleep yet, but you're no longer fully awake either. You're in the gentle middle place where rest begins to take shape, where effort dissolves into ease. And in that space with the cabin settled around you, and the night holding steady outside, you drift a little closer to sleep without needing to try. As you settle more fully into stillness, your awareness begins to shift inward toward the layers of clothing you're still wearing. On the frontier, sleep rarely meant undressing completely. What you wore to bed was part of your insulation, part of your strategy. You become aware now of fabric resting against your skin, of weight distributed in familiar ways, of seams and folds that have shaped themselves to your body over time. Period inventories and household notes often indicate that people owned only a few sets of clothing, many of them worn both day and night. Nightwear as a separate category was not universal. Instead, garments were chosen for warmth, durability, and ease of movement. You feel that practicality now, the way each layer contributes quietly to comfort rather than style. Your shirt, likely linen or homespun cotton, feels soft from repeated washing. It carries the faint memory of soap and sun. Over it, perhaps a heavier layer remains on something woolen that traps heat close to your skin. Wool has a way of regulating temperature warming without smothering. You notice how it holds warmth even as the air cools. A small detail mentioned in some personal letters from the period describes people sleeping in their day clothes during particularly cold spells, sometimes loosening only belts or outer fastenings. Comfort was negotiated rather than perfected. You sense that same compromise now, the balance between ease and preparedness. Your legs feel the weight of fabric draped loosely, not restrictive, just present. The texture grounds you. Clothing here is not about appearance. It is about continuity, about moving from work to rest without sharp transitions. That continuity eases the mind. Some observers of early rural life have pointed out that clothing also served as a kind of emotional boundary. Wearing familiar garments at night helped people feel anchored, especially in unfamiliar or newly settled places. You recognize that anchoring sensation, now subtle but real. You shift slightly, allowing the fabric to settle more comfortably. The movement is slow and careful, instinctive. You're already learning how little motion is needed. The bed responds with a soft sound, then stills again. Your hands rest where they fall, perhaps folded loosely over your middle or tucked beneath the blanket. The skin there warms quickly. You feel the quiet reassurance of your own body heat building and holding. The air near your face remains cool, refreshing with each breath. This contrast between cool air and warm layers creates a gentle rhythm. Inhale, cool. Exhale, warm. The pattern repeats, lulling without effort. Some historical observers noted that people often slept closer to fully dressed during uncertain times, finding reassurance in readiness. Others suggest it was simply practical, reducing the effort required to rise before dawn. Either way, the habit shaped how rest was experienced. You feel its influence now, a calm readiness woven into relaxation. Your thoughts drift toward the sensations rather than ideas. The slight pressure of cloth at your shoulders, the faint weight across your legs, the way warmth gathers where fabric overlaps. Each sensation anchors you further in the present. The fire has nearly settled into embers, and its influence is now indirect. Heat stored in the room and in your clothing takes over. The transition is so gradual you barely notice it happening. There is a quiet intimacy in this moment, not with another person, but with the simple mechanics of being human in a sheltered space. Breath, warmth, stillness. These are enough. Some scholars of everyday history have remarked that much of past life was defined not by dramatic events, but by repeated small adjustments to comfort. You're experiencing one of those adjustments now, refined through countless nights by countless people before you. Your eyelids grow heavier again. You let them close for longer stretches this time. When they open, the room looks softer, less distinct. Shadows blend into one another. Edges lose their sharpness. You notice how your body has stopped searching for a better position. It has found one that will do. That acceptance brings a wave of ease through your muscles, starting at your shoulders and flowing downward. Your breathing deepens further. The pause between breaths lengthens slightly. Each inhale feels like it arrives on its own without being summoned. Outside, the night continues its slow, steady course. You do not track it anymore. Its presence is implied like a distant current under calm water. There is a quiet dignity in this kind of rest. Nothing elaborate, nothing excessive. Just enough warmth, enough shelter, enough calm. You feel gratitude without needing to name it. A faint memory or image drifts through your mind, indistinct and gentle. It does not demand interpretation. It simply passes like a cloud crossing a dim sky. Your body grows heavier against the bed as if gravity has increased slightly. Muscles loosen in small waves. Your jaw unclenches. Your forehead smooths. You are approaching the threshold where thought begins to dissolve into sensation. The boundary between awareness and sleep thins. In this state, time stretches. Moments feel longer, softer. There is no urgency to move forward. You're exactly where you need to be. The cabin holds steady around you. The night remains patient. Your breathing continues its slow, even rhythm. and as you rest there, wrapped in layered cloth and quiet air, you drift a little deeper into the calm carried gently towards sleep. Your awareness begins to loosen its grip on the edges of things. Sensations no longer arrive all at once. They come one at a time, drifting in softly, then dissolving before you can hold them for long. This is the space where sleep begins to reshape attention rather than replace it. You notice the fire again, or rather what remains of it. Not flame, not even glow, but a faint internal warmth that seems to radiate from the hearthstones themselves. Heat stored in clay and rock continues to leak outward, long after visible light has faded. Period household notes often mention that a well-banked fire could warm a room for hours even when no flame was visible. You feel that lingering generosity now. The air is cooled slightly, but not enough to disturb you. Instead, it encourages stillness. Your body adjusts automatically, pulling warmth inward, conserving it without thought. This instinctive response once mattered greatly, especially during long winters when conserving energy was essential to endurance. Some early observers wrote that people of the frontier slept in a state that was neither fully relaxed nor tense, but quietly alert, a kind of resting readiness shaped by environment rather than fear. You recognize that balance forming in yourself. Your mind is calm yet lightly aware. Your breathing deepens further. The pause at the bottom of each breath stretches a little longer. In that pause there is a sense of suspension, like floating briefly before sinking again. It feels natural, unforced. The bed beneath you responds to your weight with tiny shifts. Straw or husks settle further, creating small hollows that cradle your shape. This slow adaptation mirrors your own body's surrender to rest. Nothing needs to be adjusted. The system has found its equilibrium. A subtle sound reaches you from outside, perhaps the distant movement of branches or an animal passing far away. It arrives softened by distance and walls stripped of urgency. You register it without reaction, letting it fade on its own. Personal writings from the 19th century occasionally mention how people came to recognize the difference between sounds that required action and those that did not. Over time, this discernment became automatic. You feel that quiet discernment at work, now filtering the world without effort. Your hands grow warm where they rest. Fingers loosen slightly. You may notice a gentle heaviness spreading through your arms, a pleasant weight that anchors you to the bed. This heaviness is not fatigue, but release. The air smells faintly of ash and wood softened by time. It is no longer sharp. It has settled into something neutral, almost comforting. Smell in this moment feels less like information and more like atmosphere. Some cultural historians have suggested that nightly routines like this helped regulate emotion long before the idea of stress existed. The body learned to unwind through repetition and familiarity. You sense that wisdom at work, now guiding you without instruction. Your thoughts wander briefly, then slow again. They no longer form clear narratives. Instead, they drift as fragments, impressions without obligation. A memory flickers, a colour, a vague feeling. Each passes gently, leaving no trace. You become aware of the quiet weight of the blanket across your legs. It presses just enough to remind you of gravity of being held in place. This pressure feels grounding, reassuring in its consistency. The room itself seems to recede. Walls fade into suggestion. The ceiling becomes a dark, indistinct presence overhead. You're less aware of the cabin as an object, and more aware of being contained within a safe pocket of stillness. There is a moment when your breathing and the imagined rhythm of the night outside seem to align. Inhale, pause, exhale. Wind somewhere far away moves in a similar pattern. The synchronization is subtle, almost imagined, but soothing all the same. Some writers from the period remark that true rest often arrived not with sleep itself, but just before it, in the moments when the body finally stopped anticipating interruption. You recognize that moment now. Nothing is expected of you. Nothing needs watching. Your eyelids rest closed more fully now. When they flutter open briefly, the darkness feels soft rather than empty. You let them close again without effort. The weight of the day continues to drain away. Muscles you didn't realize were tense release in small waves. Your jaw loosens, your brow smooths, even your breathing seems to sigh. You're no longer tracking time. Minutes lose their edges. The idea of before and after begins to blur. There is only this gentle present expanding quietly. Outside, the world continues its slow cycle. Inside, your awareness drifts inward, narrowing to the steady rhythm of breath and warmth. A final thought drifts through unformed and gentle, then dissolves before it can settle. You do not try to hold on to it. The boundary between waking and sleeping thins further. Sensation softens, awareness dims. You are not falling asleep so much as easing into it, carried by familiarity, warmth and quiet. And in this stillness, with the cabin holding its shape around you and the night keeping watch beyond the walls, you slip a little deeper into rest. Your awareness now drifts in a slower, heavier way, as though moving through warm water. Thoughts no longer line up in any order you can follow. They surface gently and then dissolve before forming edges. This is the part of rest where the mind stops trying to manage the night and begins to float within it. The cabin continues to hold its quiet shape around you. The walls no longer feel like boundaries, but like steady presences, familiar and dependable. Heat stored in wood and earth releases itself in slow patience. Earlier accounts from rural life often mention how a well-built cabin seemed to breathe through the night, giving warmth back gradually rather than all at once. You feel that slow exchange, now subtle but constant. Your breathing deepens again, almost without your permission. Each inhale expands softly through your chest. Each exhale empties more completely than the last. The rhythm becomes smooth enough that you stop noticing where one breath ends and the next begins. Your body feels heavier, yet somehow lighter at the same time. Muscles release their last small efforts. The tension that once held your shoulders slightly raised melts away. Your legs sink further into the bedding. Even your hands, which once held shape, now rest loosely, fingers curved in natural ease. Some early observers of frontier life wrote that true rest arrived not through stillness alone, but through surrender. They noticed that people slept best once they stopped monitoring the world around them. You sense that threshold now, the moment when vigilance gently steps aside. Outside, the night continues without interruption. You no longer track its sounds individually. They blend into a low, distant texture like fabric brushed softly between fingers. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing breaks the calm. The air against your face feels cooler than the air beneath the blanket. That contrast keeps your breathing slow and steady. It is a quiet dialogue between warmth and coolness that your body understands instinctively. There is a faint awareness of gravity pressing you downward, not harshly but with reassurance. The bed supports you without asking anything in return. You no longer adjust your position. It feels complete as it is. Some writings from the 19th century describe sleep as a kind of agreement between body and surroundings. When conditions felt right, rest arrived naturally. You are living that agreement now. Nothing is forced. Nothing resists. Your thoughts grow softer, less verbal. Images drift in and out without meaning. A vague sense of light, a remembered texture, a suggestion of movement. Each dissolves before becoming clear, leaving only calm behind. The space inside your head feels wider than before, quieter too. Silence there is not empty. It feels padded safe like sound wrapped in cloth. You notice that even your awareness of breathing begins to fade. The body continues its rhythm without supervision. You do not need to guide it anymore. Some scholars of sleep history have suggested that people once experienced a more fluid boundary between waking and dreaming, sliding back and forth before settling fully. You seem to be entering that fluid zone now, where attention loosens and imagination stirs gently beneath the surface. Your eyelids feel heavy but relaxed. They no longer flutter. They simply rest. Darkness behind them is not black, but soft like deep shadow. The cabin no longer feels external. It feels internal, as though its stillness has moved inside you. The quiet outside and the quiet within begin to mirror each other. You may notice a faint sense of drifting, as if your body was slightly lighter than the bed beneath it. This sensation comes and goes harmless and brief. You let it pass without curiosity. Your breathing slows further, stretching each cycle. The pauses grow longer. Time loses its structure. Minutes no longer matter. Some accounts from early settlers describe sleep as going under a phrase that suggests immersion rather than disappearance. You feel that immersion now, like being gently lowered into calm water. A soft warmth lingers at your core, spreading outward. It does not move quickly. It simply exists, steady and reassuring. Your thoughts now arrive as fragments of feeling rather than language. A sense of safety, a sense of enclosure, a sense of rest earned. The world beyond the cabin feels very far away. Even the idea of distance seems to fade. There is only here, only now. Your breathing continues quiet and regular. Your body remains supported, nothing interrupts, nothing intrudes. You drift deeper into this space between waking and sleep, where awareness loosens its hold and the mind begins to wander freely. The night accepts this shift without comment. The cabin holds its silence. The air remains gentle, and as your consciousness softens further, you sink into a calmer, slower rhythm, moving naturally towards sleep, carried by warmth, stillness, and the quiet persistence of the dark. Your awareness drifts again, this time toward the temperature itself, not as a number or sensation to measure, but as something that slowly settles into your bones. Cold on the frontier rarely arrived all at once. It crept in patiently, layer by layer, testing how well you had prepared. Right now it feels held at bay, paused just outside your blanket and clothing. The warmth closest to your body feels earned rather than given. It comes from effort stored earlier in the day, from movement, from fire tended at the right time, from choices made before nightfall. Period records suggest that people thought of warmth as something cultivated, not guaranteed. You sense that idea now, as if the heat around you carries memory. Your feet tucked beneath layers grow heavier and calmer. The faint chill that once lingered at the edges of awareness has softened. It no longer asks for attention. Instead, it outlines the warmth, more clearly giving it shape. Contrast, not excess, is what makes comfort noticeable. A small observation tucked into Frontier Journals notes that many people slept with their knees slightly bent or drawn in, instinctively conserving warmth. You notice your own posture has drifted that way, not forced, just natural. The body knows how to protect itself when given the chance. The air beyond the blanket cools further, but it does not intrude. It remains a boundary rather than a threat. Your face feels its freshness while your chest and limbs remain wrapped in steady heat. This balance creates a quiet alertness even as rest deepens. Some later interpretations suggest that people of the time developed a refined sensitivity to temperature changes, especially during sleep. They learned to recognize when cold meant danger and when it was simply part of the night's rhythm. You feel that distinction now, subtle but reassuring. Your breathing syncs with this rhythm. Each inhale draws in cool air that wakes your senses just enough. Each exhale returns warmth to your body, reinforcing the feeling of shelter. The cycle repeats without effort. The blanket presses gently, its weight distributed evenly. It does not trap heat aggressively. Instead, it moderates, smoothing the exchange between your body and the surrounding air. This quiet regulation is part of why sleep deepens so naturally here. A small detail recorded in domestic accounts mentions that people often tucked extra cloth around their shoulders or feet, rather than piling weight on their torso. This allowed warmth to circulate without discomfort. You sense that same logic in how your coverings rest now. Your attention drifts again not to thoughts, but to sensation itself. The way warmth spreads slowly, almost imperceptibly. the way cold retreats in response, the way your body adjusts without instruction. The cabin participates in this balance. Wood holds warmth differently than stone, releasing it gradually. The floor beneath you feels neutral, neither cold nor warm, just steady. That steadiness supports the sense of rest growing inside you. Outside, the night air continues its quiet work, cooling the land inch by inch. You're aware of it only as a distant presence, like a faraway tide. It no longer concerns you. The boundary between inside and out holds firm. Some researchers have noted that people in earlier centuries often described warmth as a form of comfort equal to companionship. You understand that idea now. The warmth around you feels companionable, almost attentive. Your muscles soften further, especially in places that held tension without your noticing. Your calves relax, your shoulders sink, your hands grow heavier. Each small release deepens the overall calm. Thoughts come less frequently now. When they do, they feel thin and transparent, unable to anchor themselves. They pass like faint reflections on dark glass. You may notice a subtle pulsing in your body, a gentle echo of your heartbeat. It is not loud or intrusive. It simply marks time in a quiet, steady way. Some historical writings describe sleep as something that arrives in waves, not all at once. You feel one of those waves passing through now, smoothing the edges of awareness, pulling you a little deeper. Your breathing grows slower still. The pause after each exhale lengthens naturally. There is no effort in it. The body seems to know exactly how much air it needs. The cabin's presence fades further into the background. You no longer picture its walls or ceiling clearly. What remains is a sense of enclosure without detail, like being held in a darkened hollow. The outside world recedes almost completely. Sounds blur into a single distant hush. Even that hush begins to feel optional, something you could let go of if you wished. You are aware faintly that sleep is approaching, but there is no urgency to meet it. It will arrive on its own time. You simply continue resting in this in-between space. Your awareness narrows to sensation alone: warmth, weight, stillness, breath. Everything else fades. You drift further into this calm, carried by the steady exchange between body and night, settling gently into the deeper quiet that waits just beyond waking. Your mind drifts into a softer kind of noticing now, one that no longer tries to label or interpret. Sensation arrives as texture rather than information. Warmth feels rounded. Coolness feels distant. The boundary between them is gentle, not sharp. You rest within that balance as though it were designed specifically for this moment. The bed beneath you no longer feels like an object. It has become a surface of support without edges. Your weight distributes evenly, and your body settles into a shape that requires no correction. Muscles that once held small tensions release them one by one quietly without announcement. Old household descriptions sometimes mention how people could tell when the night had truly settled by the way their bodies stopped fidgeting. Restlessness faded not because of exhaustion, but because conditions finally felt right. You sense that threshold now. The impulse to adjust disappears. Your breathing continues its slow, even rhythm. Each inhale is cool and clean. Each exhale is warm and unhurried. The exchange feels almost ceremonial, like a tide moving in and out of a sheltered inlet. Nothing interrupts it. Nothing needs to. The darkness behind your closed eyes has depth now. It is not empty. It has layers like soft fabric folded over itself. You're aware of space without needing to see it. This inner darkness feels calm rather than void. A faint awareness of sound still exists, but it has lost its edges. What once registered as separate noises now blends into a single low presence. It is not silence, but something quieter than sound. A background hum of being. Some accounts from early rural life describe nighttime as a period when the world felt paused rather than asleep. Activity did not stop so much as slow to a near standstill. You sense that stillness now thick and unhurried, as if time itself has chosen to rest. Your body continues to soften in small ways. The muscles around your eyes release. Your tongue rests naturally in your mouth. Even your jaw, often holding tension, without notice loosens slightly. These changes happen without effort or instruction. The weight of the blanket remains constant, steady and reassuring. It does not press or shift. It simply stays a quiet reminder that you are supported. The warmth beneath it feels stable, neither rising nor fading. Some period letters describe how people came to associate this stage of the night with a feeling of safety that was hard to explain but deeply felt. It was not based on certainty but on familiarity. You recognize that feeling now, a calm that does not ask for reasons. Your thoughts, when they appear, are less like sentences and more like impressions, a colour, a sensation, a half-formed image that dissolves before it can take shape. There is no urge to follow any of them. They drift past on their own. The sense of time becomes vague. You could not say how long you have been resting this way. Minutes and moments lose distinction. There is only a gentle continuity flowing now. You become faintly aware of your heartbeat again, not as a sound, but as a subtle rhythm inside your chest. It is steady and unhurried, matching the calm that has settled throughout your body. Some scholars who study daily life in earlier centuries suggest that people were more attuned to these internal rhythms, having fewer external clocks to dominate their attention. You feel that attunement now, listening inward rather than outward. The air around you feels still, as though it too has decided to pause. Any movement is so slight it barely registers. The room seems to hold its breath along with you. Your limbs feel heavier but not uncomfortable. It is the pleasant heaviness that comes just before sleep deepens. You could move if you wanted to, but the idea holds no appeal. The edges of awareness blur further. You're no longer tracking your surroundings in detail. Instead, you experience a general sense of being held within a quiet space. A distant, half-remembered image drifts through your mind, perhaps of firelight or shadow or warmth. It does not resolve into a scene, it simply passes like a reflection on dark water. Your breathing slows again subtly. Each breath seems to sink deeper into your body, settling somewhere low and steady. The pauses between breaths stretch just a little longer. This is the moment when the boundary between waking and sleeping becomes thin enough to pass through without noticing. You're not crossing it deliberately, you're drifting toward it. Outside the cabin, the night continues its patient cycle. Inside, your awareness folds inward, growing quieter by degrees. Your body feels complete, contained at ease. Nothing needs to be adjusted, nothing needs attention. Everything necessary is already in place. The sense of effort fades almost entirely. Even the act of listening relaxes. Sensations blur at their edges and merge into a single calm presence. You feel yourself sinking gently, as though into a deeper layer of rest beneath the surface of awareness. There is no sudden drop, only a gradual softening. Thoughts lose their shape, sensations soften further, time loosens its hold. You remain aware enough to notice the comfort of this state, but not enough to analyze it. It simply exists and you exist within it. Breath continues, warmth remains, stillness holds, and slowly, quietly you drift deeper into the calm, moving closer to the kind of sleep that comes without effort, carried by the steady, patient quiet of the night. Your awareness thins further like mist, dispersing at dawn, though night still holds its place outside. Sensation now arrives, muted, softened before it reaches you. The boundary between your body and the space around it feels less defined, as if both are sharing the same slow rhythm. The bed no longer feels like a surface beneath you. Instead, it feels like a quiet extension of your own weight supporting without effort. You're aware of gravity only as a gentle presence, a steady reassurance rather than a pull. Your limbs rest exactly where they have settled, no urge left to adjust. In many early personal accounts, sleep was described not as something one entered, but something that came over a person gradually and without ceremony. You sense that same arrival now. It does not announce itself. It simply gathers layer by layer. Your breathing has become so slow it almost seems to pause between cycles. Each inhale is shallow but complete. Each exhale releases warmth that lingers faintly in the air before fading. The pattern feels ancient, practiced older than conscious thought. The cabin around you recedes even further into abstraction. You're no longer picturing walls or beams or corners. What remains is a feeling of enclosure, a quiet boundary that keeps the night gentle. This sense of being held is subtle but unmistakable. Some period writing suggests that people once measured the depth of night by how fully sound disappeared. Not silence exactly, but a kind of muffling. You notice that now. Sounds have not stopped, but they have softened into a low continuous hush that no longer asks for attention. Your thoughts drift in slow, uneven fragments. A shape, a warmth, a hint of movement. None of them last long enough to become ideas. They dissolve almost as soon as they appear like breath on cool glass. You feel a mild heaviness spreading through your torso, not uncomfortable, just grounding. It anchors you to the bed and deepens the sense of rest. Your shoulders sink a fraction more. Your neck releases a final trace of tension. Some scholars who study early sleep patterns suggest that people once experienced longer transitional states between waking and sleeping moments where consciousness hovered gently rather than switching off. You are in that suspended state now where awareness floats rather than focuses. Your hands rest loosely, fingers curved without effort. There is no impulse to clench or adjust. The warmth beneath the blanket feels steady, reliable. It does not change from moment to moment, and that consistency brings calm. Your breathing now seems to happen somewhere deeper in your body, lower and slower. The rise and fall of your chest is subtle. The pauses between breaths stretch comfortably, never strained. You may notice a faint sensation of drifting, as though your body was slightly lighter than before. It is not movement in space, but a loosening of attachment to physical position. The bed supports you completely, freeing you from the need to hold yourself. Outside, the night continues its quiet course, indifferent and steady. Whatever sounds remain are distant enough to blend into a single background presence. They no longer register as separate events. A small, almost imperceptible warmth pulses near your center, spreading outward in slow waves. It is not heat from the fire now, but warmth generated from within the body, settling into conservation mode. Historical reflections on nightly rest sometimes describe this phase as the moment when vigilance finally gives way to trust. You feel that shift occurring gently without effort or decision. Your mind releases its last attempts to organize or observe. Thoughts come less frequently, and when they do, they carry no urgency. They pass like faint ripples across a still surface. Your eyelids remain closed, heavy but relaxed. Behind them, darkness feels thick and soft-layered rather than empty. It wraps around awareness like a quiet blanket. The sense of time becomes almost meaningless. There is no clear before or after, only a slow unfolding of calm. Minutes stretch or perhaps vanish entirely. Your breathing and heartbeat find a shared rhythm, slow and steady. They seem to belong to the room as much as to you, synchronized with the quiet that surrounds everything. You are aware dimly that you're drifting closer to sleep, yet there is no desire to hurry it. This gentle descent feels complete in itself. The world narrows to warmth, stillness, and a faint inner glow of awareness. Everything else recedes. You remain suspended in this softened state, floating between thought and dream, held by the steady quiet of the night, moving naturally toward deeper rest. A faint movement of air reaches you next, subtle enough that you might miss it if you were not already drifting so quietly. It slips through the smallest openings in the walls, not as a rush, but as a wandering presence. The cabin does not seal itself completely from the world. It breathes with it. This gentle exchange has been happening all night unnoticed until now. You feel the air brush lightly against your cheek, cooler than the warmth beneath the blanket. It is not unpleasant. It feels purposeful, like a reminder that the night still exists beyond the shelter. The sensation comes and goes in slow pulses shaped by the shifting wind outside. Early building notes from frontier settlements often describe how walls were packed with mixtures of clay moss straw or ash to reduce drafts. Even when carefully done, small gaps remained. Absolute tightness was rare. Builders accepted a certain amount of airflow as unavoidable, even useful. You sense that practical acceptance in the way the cabin responds now. The moving air does not whistle or howl, it murmurs. It threads its way through narrow seams, changing direction as the wind outside turns. The sound is soft, irregular, and oddly calming, like a distant breath moving through reeds. Your skin registers the difference in temperature just enough to notice, not enough to disturb. The blanket holds its warmth, buffering the cool touch before it reaches deeper. This contrast sharpens your awareness for a moment, then lulls it again. Some diary entries from the period describe people learning to read these drafts the way others read weather reports. A stronger flow meant rising wind. A sudden stillness could mean snow. You sense a quiet steadiness tonight, nothing urgent carried on the air. The sound of moving air blends with the deeper hush of the cabin. It does not compete with it. Instead, it adds texture like a low thread woven through silence. Your mind no longer tries to separate one sound from another. They merge into a single background presence. You notice how your breathing begins to synchronize faintly with these currents. Inhale, exhale. A soft touch of coolness, then warmth again. The rhythm is gentle and unforced, as though your body has decided to mirror the environment. A lesser-known detail preserved in household journals mentions that some families stuff spare cloth or dried grass into wool gaps during especially cold nights, then removed them again when airflow was needed. Comfort was adjustable, responsive to conditions. You feel that same balance at work now, even without touching anything. The air carries a faint scent of wood and earth, refreshed slightly by its movement. It does not feel stale. It feels alive in a quiet way, circulating just enough to keep the space from growing heavy. You become aware that your attention no longer lingers on any one sensation. It drifts easily from breath to warmth to sound, never staying long. This drifting itself becomes soothing, like floating on gentle currents. There is a small creak somewhere above, perhaps a beam responding to the change in temperature. It is brief and unremarkable. You do not startle. Your body has learned that such sounds are part of the night's language. Some later interpretations of frontier life suggest that people developed an unusually intimate relationship with their dwellings, sensing tiny changes that others might ignore. You feel a trace of that intimacy now, a quiet familiarity with the way this place moves and settles. The draft shifts again lighter this time. It brushes past and disappears. You feel no need to follow it. Your awareness remains inward, wrapped in warmth and stillness. Your shoulders sink a fraction deeper into the bed. The muscles there seem to release in stages, each letting go of a small amount of effort. The release spreads slowly like warmth travelling along a thread. Your breathing grows softer. The pauses between breaths lengthen without strain. The air entering your lungs feels cool and clean. The air leaving carries warmth back into the small pocket around you. Outside, the night continues its slow circulation. Wind moves across open ground, meets the cabin, divides and moves on. You sense this only indirectly as a gentle modulation in the air touching your skin. Accounts from the era sometimes describe how people found comfort in these subtle signs of movement, feeling reassured that the world had not gone still or silent. You understand that comfort now. Motion even faint means continuity. Your thoughts, when they arise, are vague impressions rather than sentences. A memory without context, a sensation without name. They pass through like shadows underwater. The idea of the cabin as a sealed box fades. Instead, it feels like a membrane, thin but resilient, allowing exchange without exposure. This balance between inside and outside feels important, even if you cannot explain why. You notice that your jaw has fully relaxed. Your tongue rests easily. Your face feels smooth and unguarded. These small changes signal how deeply you have settled. The rhythm of the air becomes almost hypnotic. In, out, shift, stillness, repeat. It does not demand attention, it invites surrender. Some observers of early domestic life remark that comfort often came from learning to accept minor discomforts rather than eliminating them. The faint draft you feel now is part of that acceptance. It no longer registers as cold, only as presence. Your body responds by sinking further into the bed, aligning itself naturally. There is no urge to adjust or resist. Everything feels placed. The boundaries of the room blur further. You no longer picture walls or corners. You sense only a gentle enclosure, a space that holds you without pressure. Time stretches again, becoming indistinct. Seconds and minutes lose their meaning. There is only the slow continuity of breath and warmth. Your awareness dims slightly, like a lamp turned down, not off, just low, enough to see, not enough to think. The wind outside softens, or perhaps your attention drifts away from it. Either way, the movement becomes less noticeable. What remains is a steady quiet that feels deep and unbroken. You drift further into this calm, supported by warmth, rhythm, and the subtle movement of air. The night does its quiet work around you, and you allow yourself to sink with it, unresisting toward deeper rest. Your thoughts no longer form a clear line. They drift in slow curves, touching lightly, and then separating again. Awareness feels spacious now, less focused on any one sensation, and more open to a gentle overall feeling of rest. You're still present, but only loosely, like a hand floating just beneath the surface of water. The cabin seems farther away, though you know it has not moved. Its presence has softened into a general sense of enclosure rather than a structure with edges. What remains most vivid is the quiet steadiness beneath you, the subtle reassurance that nothing needs your attention. Old household writings sometimes describe sleep as arriving in layers, each one softer than the last. First came physical rest, then mental quiet, and finally a deeper kind of letting go. You recognize that progression now unfolding without effort. Your breathing has become almost imperceptible. Each inhale arrives gently, each exhale slips away without sound. The rhythm feels self-sustaining, as if it no longer belongs to conscious control. You simply notice it happening. Then stop noticing altogether for a few moments at a time. The warmth around you feels even and settled. It does not fluctuate or surprise. It simply exists, holding its place. Your body seems to trust it completely now, allowing muscles to release all remaining tension. Some period observers remark that true rest often came only after the body stopped checking its surroundings. You feel that shift happening quietly. There is no scanning, no listening for change. Only a calm acceptance of the moment as it is. Your awareness begins to fragment into softer impressions, a sense of heaviness in your limbs, a muted glow behind closed eyes, a faint internal echo of warmth. These impressions drift without direction, untethered from thought. The idea of time becomes vague. You could not say how long you've been here or how long you will remain. The concept itself feels unnecessary. There is only this sustained pause gently unfolding. You may notice a subtle pulsing sensation somewhere in your body, perhaps in your chest or fingertips. It is slow and steady, reassuring in its regularity. It blends into the background part of the larger rhythm holding you. Some reflections from early domestic life suggest that people once experienced sleep as a gradual sinking rather than a sudden drop. You are in that descent, now easing downward without resistance. Your mind no longer tries to interpret sensations. It receives them and lets them fade. A warmth passes. A shadow of a thought dissolves. A quiet moment stretches. The air around you feels still yet alive. It carries no urgency, no message. It simply exists, sharing space with you. This shared stillness feels companionable rather than empty. Your body grows heavier in a pleasant way, as if gently weighted. The pressure is even and calming, grounding you in place. You feel supported from beneath, held without effort. Some later commentators on rural life noted how people often slept more deeply once they accepted the rhythms of their environment rather than resisting them. You sense that acceptance now, not as a decision but as a natural state. Your jaw loosens completely. Your tongue rests softly. Even the small muscles around your eyes let go. Each release happens quietly without ceremony. The darkness behind your eyelids deepens, becoming more uniform. It no longer shifts or flickers. It feels smooth like fabric laid flat. Your awareness narrows further, focusing only on the most basic sensations: breath, warmth, stillness. Everything else fades into the background. There is a sense of sinking, but it is slow and gentle, like settling into deep water that fully supports you. No effort is required. You are carried. The room, the night, the passage of time all recede together. What remains is a soft, continuous calm that holds you without asking anything in return. You may notice a brief flicker of imagery or feeling indistinct and fleeting. It passes without meaning, like a dream beginning to form at the edge of sleep. Your breathing remains steady, your body heavy and relaxed. The rhythm is soothing, predictable, safe. Any remaining awareness feels distant now, as though observed through a veil. You're still here, but only faintly, gently. The world has narrowed to a quiet inner space, warm and dim. You float there unhurried, unbothered. Sleep draws closer, not as a sudden change, but as a deepening of what already is. You allow yourself to follow that deepening without resistance. And so in this softened state, wrapped in warmth and stillness, you drift further into rest, carried quietly by the slow, patient rhythm of the night. A faint shifting of light returns to your awareness, not bright enough to wake you, just enough to register as movement behind closed eyes. The fire has not gone out completely. Somewhere in the hearth, an ember stirs, sending a weak glow that rises and falls like a slow breath. The shadows respond, stretching and easing back in quiet response. You do not open your eyes, yet you sense the motion clearly. Shadow and light move together in a soft rhythm, painting the interior with changes so subtle they feel imagined. This gentle motion does not disturb you. It feels almost companionable, like a reminder that something nearby keeps watch. Accounts from early homesteads often mention how people learn to read firelight even with their eyes closed, sensing shifts through warmth and shadow alone. Fire was not only seen but felt. You understand that now, the way its presence registers as a faint pulse rather than a visual event. The glow touches the edges of your awareness and retreats again. It does not demand attention. It simply exists, slow and patient. The darkness around it thickens and thins in response, creating a quiet rhythm that feels older than memory. Your body responds with another small release. The muscles around your spine loosen. Your shoulders sink a little deeper. The bed seems to accept this change without sound or movement, as if anticipating it. There is a peculiar comfort in knowing the fire still lives even faintly. Many domestic records from frontier households describe how embers were carefully banked at night, meant to last until morning. Rekindling was easier than starting anew. That knowledge carried reassurance, especially during long cold seasons. You feel that reassurance now, even without seeing the hearth. The idea of warmth waiting for morning settles into your thoughts, and then drifts away, leaving only calm. The shadows continue their slow dance, stretching and contracting in barely perceptible ways. They do not form shapes or images. They are simply motion, gentle and abstract. Your mind does not try to interpret them. It lets them pass like ripples on dark water. Some later reflections on early home life suggest that firelight played a quiet psychological role, offering movement in the dark that felt alive but non-threatening. You sense that balance here. The motion is enough to prevent emptiness, not enough to disturb rest. Your breathing remains slow and even. Each breath seems to synchronize with the subtle rise and fall of the light. Inhale a faint brightening. Exhale a soft dimming. The pattern is soothing, almost hypnotic. Your thoughts drift in fragments again. A memory of warmth, a suggestion of colour, a half-formed feeling of safety. None of these linger long enough to become distinct. They pass through like soft reflections. The cabin around you feels very still now. Even the faint movements of air seem to pause, as if respecting the quiet. The world beyond the walls feels distant and irrelevant, A small detail recorded in household notes from the period mentions that people sometimes judge the health of a fire by the quality of its shadow rather than its brightness. A steady shadow meant steady heat. You sense that steadiness now without effort or thought. Your awareness grows heavier, sinking deeper into itself. The boundary between observing and resting continues to blur. You're no longer watching the shadows so much as drifting alongside them. The darkness behind your closed eyes feels rich and layered. It is not empty. It feels full in a quiet way, like a room filled with soft fabric. The shifting glow seems to move within that darkness, not outside it. Your body responds with another subtle release. The muscles of your legs relax fully. Your breathing slows just a little more. Each breath feels complete sufficient. There is a sense of continuity now, as though the night is gently carrying you forward without interruption. Nothing changes abruptly. Everything transitions smoothly, one state blending into the next. Some historians have noted that pre-industrial evenings often blurred into sleep without a clear dividing line. You experience that blur now. There is no moment to mark only a gradual deepening. The shadows grow softer, less defined. Their movement slows, or perhaps your awareness of it does. The distinction no longer matters. What remains is a calm, steady presence. Your thoughts fade, further thinning into impressions without shape. Even those begin to dissolve. The idea of watching, of noticing, slips away. You feel held by warmth and quiet, suspended in a space where nothing asks anything of you. The gentle pulse of the fire's last light blends seamlessly with your own steady rhythm. As the glow ebbs and flows one last time, your awareness drifts with it, sinking deeper into stillness carried by the soft, patient motion of shadow and warmth towards sleep. The silence you rest within now feels shared even though you are alone. It carries the weight of habit, of repetition, of countless evenings shaped in similar ways. This quiet is not accidental, it is practiced. It is something learned and passed along without instruction, absorbed through watching and doing. In many frontier households, evening silence followed an unspoken pattern. Once the last small tasks were finished, voices lowered naturally. People did not announce the change, it simply happened. Records from the period indicate that families often treated quiet as a form of cooperation, a way of easing everyone toward rest without commands or rules. You sense that same cooperative hush surrounding you now. The stillness feels deliberate but gentle. No one enforces it. It exists because it works. The body responds to it almost automatically, slowing its rhythms to match the softened world around it. You feel your own breathing align with that quiet agreement. Even when several people shared a single room, silence could be surprisingly complete. Contemporary observers noted that families learned to communicate with small sounds or gestures once night fell. A shift of weight, a soft cough, the faint rustle of cloth. Each sound carried meaning without disturbing the whole. You imagine how that shared awareness shaped evenings, how people learned to read one another not through words but through pauses, through stillness, through restraint. That kind of quiet was not empty. It was full of understanding. Your own silence now feels similar. It is not lonely. It feels inhabited, layered with memory and pattern. The room seems to recognize it and respond in kind, holding still around you. There is a sense of timing in this quiet, as if it arrives at a certain point in the night, whether invited or not. Earlier sounds had places and purposes. Now they fade one by one until only the softest remain. This transition feels ceremonial, though no ceremony is named. Some household journals from the era suggest that people believed excessive noise at night unsettled more than just sleep. It unsettled the order of the home. Calm sounds were thought to preserve harmony. You feel that old belief settling around you, not as superstition, but as lived experience. Your body adjusts to the shared stillness. Movements grow smaller, slower, almost symbolic rather than practical. Even swallowing or shifting feels deliberate, as though you're mindful of not breaking something delicate. The quiet seems to have texture now. It is not empty space, but a soft fabric stretched gently across the room. You can sense its depth without seeing it. It cushions thought and softens awareness. A small domestic detail recorded in letters from rural families mentions that children were often taught to listen for the quiet rather than the noise. When the quiet arrived, it meant the house was ready for sleep. You realize you are listening for that same thing now, and you can feel it has arrived. Your breathing settles into the shared rhythm. It does not stand out. It blends. You're no longer aware of where your breath ends and the stillness begins. They overlap comfortably. Outside, whatever sounds remain feel distant and unimportant. They no longer break the quiet. They float within it. The boundary between inside and outside becomes less distinct, replaced by a sense of continuity. Some later historians have pointed out that silence once carried social meaning, signalling safety, order, and trust within a household. You feel at trust now even in solitude. The quiet does not feel imposed. It feels chosen. Your thoughts slow further as though they too are observing the unspoken rules of the moment. They arrive softly and depart without urgency. No idea demands attention. No worry insists on being solved. The weight of your body presses gently into the bedding, anchoring you. The stillness around you seems to respond, settling more deeply in return. This mutual settling creates a sense of balance, almost like two sides finding equilibrium. You become aware of the smallest internal sounds, the faint movement of breath, the subtle pulse beneath your skin. These sounds do not intrude. They confirm that everything is working as it should. A few early accounts mention that people sometimes mark this quiet moment with a whispered phrase or a habitual pause, though the words themselves varied. What mattered was the acknowledgement. You sense that acknowledgement now wordless but complete. The silence grows thicker, softer, more enveloping. It feels like a shared agreement between you and the space you occupy. Nothing needs to be done. Nothing needs to be said. Your awareness continues to narrow, not sharply but gently, like a lens turning inward. External details fade into suggestion. Internal sensation becomes primary. There is comfort in knowing that this same kind of quiet once settled over countless nights in countless cabins across wide stretches of land. Different people, different lives, yet the same hush at the end of the day. Your body responds with another small release. A final letting go in your shoulders, a deeper drop into the bed. The quiet seems to welcome this thickening slightly around you. You no longer feel separate from the stillness. You are part of it, held within it. The silence does not press or demand. It simply remains. Time loosens further. The idea of sequence loses clarity. There is only a sustained calm gently unfolding. Your breathing continues slow and even barely noticeable. Each breath seems to dissolve into the surrounding quiet. Thoughts fade to impressions. Impressions fade to feeling. Feeling fades into something even softer, harder to name. The shared silence completes its work, drawing you deeper into rest. You're no longer listening to it. You are inside it. And in that shared quiet, steady and unbroken, you drift further towards sleep, carried by the calm that generations before you once knew and trusted. At some point, without any clear signal, you become aware of a small interruption in the stillness. Not a disturbance, just a gentle moment of waking within rest. Your eyes do not open, yet your attention lifts slightly as if checking the world and finding it unchanged. This brief waking was once so common it barely had a name. Period writing suggests that many people naturally stirred during the night, often without concern or anxiety. It was treated as part of sleep itself rather than a problem to solve. You experience that same quiet return to awareness now. Your body remains heavy and relaxed. Nothing urges you to move. The bed holds you in the same steady way and the warmth has not faded. The air feels much the same as before, calm and patient. Only your awareness has shifted, floating closer to the surface for a moment. You notice the silence again, but differently this time. It feels deeper, more settled, as though it has been layered over itself. Sounds are fewer now, and those that remain seem distant and softened, like echoes remembered rather than heard. Some observers of early sleep habits wrote that people often woke briefly in the middle of the night to adjust a blanket, listen, or simply lie still before drifting off again. This was not considered interruption, but part of the rhythm. You feel that rhythm guiding you now. Your breathing continues slow and even. You become aware of the gentle rise and fall of your chest, steady and unforced. Each breath seems to reassure you that everything is in order. There is a faint sensation of coolness near your face, balanced by warmth elsewhere. The contrast feels familiar, now almost comforting. You no longer register it as change, only as part of the environment's quiet balance. A small detail preserved in household notes mentions that people sometimes use these half-waking moments to listen for weather shifts or distant animals, not out of fear but habit. You notice that instinct briefly stirring, then fading when nothing calls for attention. Your thoughts drift lazily unstructured. They do not form plans or worries. Instead, they appear as fragments of feeling, half-images, soft impressions that fade as soon as they surface. The darkness behind your closed eyes feels thicker now, more complete. It no longer shifts or flickers. It simply holds steady like a calm backdrop. You sense the passage of time without measuring it. Minutes stretch gently. There is no pressure to sleep deeper or stay awake. You exist in a comfortable in-between, suspended and safe. Some later interpretations of early sleep patterns suggest that this middle waking allowed the mind to reset before deeper rest returned. You feel that reset happening quietly, like a system recalibrating itself. Your body responds with another subtle release. The muscles in your back soften further. Your jaw loosens again, even if you thought it already had. Small tensions dissolve in stages, each one barely noticeable. The bed feels more supportive now, as if it has adjusted itself to you. The contact between your body and the surface beneath feels evenly distributed, calm and stable. You sense your heartbeat faintly slow and regular. It does not demand attention. It simply marks continuity, a steady signal that everything is functioning as it should. Outside, the night continues unchanged. If there's movement, it is distant enough to blend into the background. The world feels paused in a long breath. A gentle thought drifts through, not fully formed, perhaps the idea of morning or warmth or light. It does not stay long. It dissolves before taking shape, leaving only a soft aftertaste of anticipation. Some historians of everyday life note that this middle stretch of the night was often when people felt most at ease, freed from the tasks of day and the anticipation of morning. You feel that ease now, settled and quiet. Your awareness begins to sink again, slipping back toward deeper rest. The brief alertness fades without resistance. There is no effort required to let it go. Breathing remains slow and rhythmic. Each cycle feels like a gentle wave passing through you. The pauses between breaths grow slightly longer, more relaxed. The edges of perception blur. Sensations soften further. Thought thins until it becomes almost transparent. You're aware only of warmth, stillness, and a faint sense of being held. Everything else recedes into the background. This second descent into sleep feels smoother than the first. There is familiarity now, a sense that you have done this before many times, even if you do not remember. Your body yields, easily trusting the quiet around it. The night accepts that trust without ceremony. As awareness fades again, the calm deepens. You drift downward, gently carried by the same steady rhythm that has guided you all along. And in this deeper quiet, with nothing to attend to and nowhere to go, you slip once more towards sleep. Wrapped in stillness and ease, you drift in a state where awareness feels thin and wide at the same time, like a veil stretched gently across your senses. The moment of brief waking has passed, and now you sink again more smoothly, as if your body remembers the path. There is no effort in this descent. It happens on its own, guided by rhythm and familiarity. The night around you has deepened. Not darker exactly, but quieter in a more settled way. The kind of quiet that comes only after hours have passed and the world has fully committed to rest. You feel it as a kind of still pressure, soft and constant. Records from rural households suggest that the deepest part of the night was often described as the long, middler stretch, when activity ceased almost entirely. Fires were reduced to embers. Animals lay still. Even wind often seemed to pause. You sense that middle now, a wide calm where nothing asks for attention. Your breathing remains slow and regular. Each breath arrives, gently fills you just enough, then leaves without urgency. The pause after each exhale feels longer than before, comfortable and unforced. It is as if your body has settled into its most economical rhythm. The warmth beneath your blankets feels stable and evenly distributed. It no longer spreads or shifts. It simply exists, a quiet constant. The contrast between your warm core and the cooler air near your face has become familiar, almost soothing in its predictability. A subtle heaviness continues to anchor you. Your limbs feel fully at rest, not heavy in an unpleasant way, but grounded as though gravity itself has softened. There is no sense of effort left in your body. Some historical accounts note that people often describe this part of the night as the most restorative, even if they could not explain why. They simply knew that after this stretch they woke feeling steadier. You can sense that restoration unfolding now quietly and without drama. Your thoughts have slowed to the point where they barely form at all. Instead of ideas, there are impressions, a vague warmth, a sense of depth, a feeling of being safely enclosed. These impressions drift through without leaving a trace. The boundaries of the room feel distant now. You're no longer aware of walls or corners. The space around you feels more like a cocoon than a structure. Containment without confinement. Your awareness occasionally flickers, then settles again. Each flicker grows softer than the last, like ripples fading across still water. There is a faint internal rhythm that continues beneath everything else. Perhaps your heartbeat, perhaps your breath. It does not matter which. It is steady, slow, reassuring. You do not need to monitor it. It carries on without instruction. Some later writers suggested that deep rest often arrived when attention stopped trying to control experience. You're no longer directing anything. You're simply present within the quiet. The sensation of time loosens even further. You cannot tell how long you've been resting, and it no longer matters. The idea of before and after feels distant, almost abstract. Your body feels settled into its shape, perfectly matched to the surface beneath. There is no urge to move, no impulse to adjust. Everything feels aligned. The air around you seems almost motionless now. If it moves at all, it does so too gently to notice. The world feels paused, suspended in a calm that does not demand awareness. Your inner landscape grows softer. Thoughts fade before forming words. Images appear only as hints, then dissolve. There is no storyline, only atmosphere. This is the quiet centre of the night, the part few remember clearly. It is not dramatic or vivid. It is simply deep, steady rest. A sense of safety settles fully now, complete and unquestioned. You do not think about it. You feel it woven into the stillness. Your breathing becomes so subtle that it feels almost optional. Each inhale and exhale flows naturally without conscious participation. The warmth around you holds steady. The bed supports you evenly. The silence remains undisturbed. You're no longer moving towards sleep. You're within it, floating in its deeper layers. Awareness is dim but present, like a low light behind closed doors. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go. The night holds you without effort. And in this deep quiet where sensation fades into softness, and time loosens its grip, you continue to rest, suspended gently in the long, calm middle of sleep. A faint awareness stirs again, softer than before, like a ripple passing under still water. You do not wake so much as surface slightly hovering between depth and lightness. The quiet remains intact, unbroken, as if it has learned how to hold you even while you move within it, Some accounts written by settlers describe this part of the night as the moment when listening became instinctive rather than intentional. You sense that shift now. Your attention opens just enough to register the world, but not enough to engage with it. You're aware without effort. A distant sound reaches you, not sharp, not close. Perhaps the low movement of air across the land or something small passing through grass far away. It arrives muted, already softened by distance and walls. Your body registers it briefly, then lets it pass. You notice that your breathing adjusts almost imperceptibly in response. A slightly deeper inhale, then a long, easy release. There is no tension attached to the sound. Your system recognizes it as part of the normal rhythm of night. Notes from everyday life in the 19th century suggest that people often learn to distinguish meaningful sounds from harmless ones while half asleep. This skill was not taught formally, but absorbed over time. You feel that quiet discernment working now, automatic and calm. The air around you feels settled, neither warming nor cooling, just steady. The earlier contrasts have softened into balance. You're no longer aware of layers of temperature, there is simply comfort. Your body lies heavy and at ease. The weight you feel is not pressure but grounding, like being gently anchored. Your limbs rest without thought. There is no impulse to move them. A subtle sense of space returns not as a visual image, but as a feeling of openness. The room seems larger now, less defined. Boundaries blur into suggestion. You're not contained so much as held within a quiet field. Some later commentators on early domestic life observed that nighttime awareness often expanded outward rather than inward, becoming less focused on the self. You sense that expansion, now a widening of perception that feels peaceful rather than distracting. Your thoughts appear only as fragments, a colour, a texture, a vague warmth. They float briefly, then dissolve. You do not try to follow them. They come and go on their own. The silence deepens again, but this time it feels layered like several soft blankets placed one over another. Each layer adds calm without weight. You sink gently into it. A minor sound arises and fades, perhaps the settling of wood, or the distant call of something beyond the walls. It does not startle you. It simply becomes part of the background texture before disappearing. Some household writings from the era mention that people trusted the night to announce anything important. Silence itself was reassuring. You sense that trust now quiet and complete. Your breathing remains slow and unforced. The pauses between breaths lengthen slightly, then stabilize. Each cycle feels self-sustaining, as though your body has found its most efficient rhythm. The sense of time continues to dissolve. Minutes lose their meaning. You cannot say how long you've been here, and the question feels irrelevant. Your awareness drifts inward again, settling deeper. The edges of sensation blur. The distinction between body and bed softens until they feel like a single, continuous surface. There is a faint impression of warmth moving slowly through you, not as heat but as ease. It spreads gently, smoothing out any remaining tension. Some researchers who study historical sleep patterns suggest that this stage was often the most restorative, even if it went unnoticed. You experience that restoration quietly now without needing to name it. Your inner world grows simpler. Fewer impressions reach you. Those that do arrive without urgency and fade just as gently. The outside world feels very far away, as though separated by layers of soft distance. Even the idea of the cabin itself recedes, replaced by a general sense of shelter. Your body feels perfectly content to remain still. There is no urge to change position. No discomfort calls for attention. The quiet thickens, becoming almost tangible. It wraps around you, holding you in a calm suspension. Your breathing and heartbeat continue their slow, steady pattern. They feel synchronized, part of a single rhythm that underlies everything. Awareness narrows further, drifting toward a deep, even rest. You're not trying to sleep. You're simply allowing sleep to deepen on its own. The last traces of alertness soften and fade. Sensations blur into a gentle background hum. You rest there, suspended in a peaceful middle space where nothing asks and nothing resists. And in that soft, steady quiet you drift onward, carried by the calm that settles fully around you, moving deeper into the long, unbroken rest of the night. A subtle change moves through your awareness, so gentle, it feels more like a shift in texture than an event. The deep stillness you have been resting in grows smoother, more uniform, as if the night itself has exhaled and settled into a steadier rhythm. You remain asleep, yet some quiet part of you continues to register the world in softened outlines. The air feels slightly denser now, not heavier, just more settled. It carries a sense of continuity, as though nothing has interrupted the long flow of night. Your breathing remains slow and even matching that continuity without effort. Writings from rural households sometimes describe this phase of night as the true middle, when activity everywhere seemed to pause at once. Fires were low, animals lay still, even wind appeared to hesitate. You can sense that collective pause now stretched gently around you. Your body feels fully at rest. Muscles no longer hold shape or intention. They rest where gravity has placed them loose and compliant. The bed beneath you feels less like a surface and more like a quiet extension of your own weight. Thoughts no longer arrive as ideas. Instead, there are only traces of sensation, soft impressions that fade almost immediately. A vague warmth, a sense of depth, a feeling of being supported. Nothing demands interpretation. Your breathing continues in a slow, steady pattern, each cycle unfolding naturally. The pause between breaths feels unremarkable yet comforting. It signals ease rather than absence. There is a faint impression of space around you, though you no longer picture walls or shapes. The room exists more as a feeling than a structure. You're aware of being enclosed but without edges or boundaries. Some observers of everyday life in earlier centuries noted that people often describe this part of the night as the most peaceful, because even thoughts seem to sleep. You sense that quiet now, a mental stillness that feels complete rather than empty. Your awareness drifts without direction, like a leaf floating on calm water. There's no need to steer it. Wherever it goes, the experience remains gentle. The sensation of warmth has evened out entirely. There are no longer cool or warm spots, only a balanced neutral comfort. Your body no longer checks for temperature. It trusts the environment fully. A distant, indistinct sound may pass through your awareness, but it dissolves before it can form meaning. It does not pull you upward. It simply fades back into the background of quiet. The concept of time continues to loosen. Moments stretch and overlap. You could not say whether seconds or minutes pass. The flow feels continuous, unbroken. Your inner focus narrows further, settling into a calm center. Awareness becomes less about noticing and more about being. You're present without effort. There is a softness behind your closed eyes, like a deep shade that absorbs rather than reflects. Nothing flickers there now. The darkness feels stable and calm. Your body seems to sink a little more, though it does not actually move. The sensation is internal, a gentle letting go of the last threads of alertness. Some historians who have studied sleep customs suggest that this depth of rest was common in times before artificial light, when nights were long and unhurried. You experience that depth now, quietly and naturally. The rhythm of your breathing blends completely with the stillness around you. There is no separation between inside and outside, only a shared calm. Your thoughts have faded almost entirely. What remains is a soft awareness without language or direction. It does not question or analyze. It simply exists. The quiet feels thick and reassuring, like a blanket laid over the mind. It muffles edges and smooths transitions. You feel deeply settled, as if you have reached a resting place that requires no effort to maintain. Everything holds itself. The sense of self becomes lighter, less defined. You're still here, but gently diffused, spread across warmth and quiet. Nothing calls you forward. Nothing pulls you back. You float in a balanced stillness that feels timeless. Breath continues its slow cycle, barely perceptible now. Each one flows into the next without pause or emphasis. The night remains steady, patient, unchanging, It does not demand awareness, it simply exists alongside you. And in this deep, even calm where sensation softens into silence and thought dissolves into rest, you remain suspended in the quiet center of sleep, drifting peacefully onward. A faint awareness lingers at the edges of your rest like a dim glow far behind closed eyes. It does not call you back to waking, it simply exists steady and calm, woven into the quiet. You are resting deeply now, yet still faintly aware of being held in place by warmth, stillness and time. The night feels settled into its longest stretch. Accounts from rural life often describe this hour as the point when everything outside seemed to pause together, as if the land itself were resting. You sense that shared pause now, wide and unbroken, stretching far beyond the cabin walls. Your body lies completely at ease. There is no tension left to release. Muscles rest in their natural alignment, neither held nor slack. The weight of your body feels evenly distributed, supported without effort. You do not notice individual parts anymore, only a general sense of grounded calm. Your breathing is slow and shallow yet full. Each breath seems to arise on its own, guided by an inner rhythm older than thought. The pauses between breaths are gentle and unremarkable, like the quiet spaces between waves. The air around you feels still and settled. There is no sense of movement or change, only a soft equilibrium. It carries a neutral warmth, neither cooling nor warming, simply present. This steadiness contributes to the feeling that nothing needs to happen next. Some writings from early domestic life describe the deepest part of night as a time when awareness thinned, when people were neither fully asleep nor awake, but suspended in a kind of peaceful in-between. You are resting in that same interval now where attention loosens its grip. Your thoughts have become so faint they barely qualify as thoughts at all. They appear as fleeting impressions, then dissolve before forming meaning. There is no narrative, no direction, only quiet continuity. The sense of the room has softened almost completely. You do not picture walls, corners, or furniture. What remains is a vague sense of shelter, a protective envelope that holds you without pressure. Your heartbeat continues its steady rhythm, barely perceptible unless you notice it. It feels calm and reliable, like a distant drum marking time without urgency. The darkness behind your closed eyes is smooth and even. It no longer shifts or flickers. It feels like depth rather than absence, something you rest within rather than look at. Some later reflections on historical sleep suggest that people often experienced this stage as the most restorative, even if they never remembered it. You sense that restoration now happening quietly and without effort. Your awareness drifts further inward. Sensations blur together into a single field of comfort. Warmth, stillness, and breath merge into one continuous experience. There is no impulse to move. Your body seems perfectly content where it is. Even the idea of movement feels distant and unnecessary. The quiet around you grows thicker, more complete. It does not press in, it supports. Like a soft atmosphere, it holds everything gently in place. Time feels suspended. Moments do not advance so much as deepen. You're no longer tracking progression, only continuity. Your mind rests in a state without edges. There are no clear thoughts, no images demanding attention. Awareness floats light and diffuse. The outside world feels far away now, as though separated by many layers of calm. Even the idea of sound or motion seems abstract. Your breathing continues its slow, even cycle, almost imperceptible. Each breath blends seamlessly into the next. The sense of self softens further. You're still present but less defined, more like a quiet presence than a person with boundaries. Nothing changes, nothing needs to. The stillness itself feels complete. In this deep rest, the night seems to cradle you steady and unhurried. You drift within it, supported by warmth, silence, and the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. And so you remain suspended in this peaceful depth, where awareness fades into rest and rest into something even softer, carried onward by the quiet persistence of sleep. Somewhere deep within your rest, a gentle shift occurs so subtle it barely qualifies as a change. It feels less like waking and more like turning slightly in a long dream. Your awareness does not rise so much as rearrange itself, settling into a new balance that feels just as calm as before. The night has moved on without announcement. What was once the deepest stillness now carries a faint sense of continuation, as though time itself has quietly taken another step forward. Accounts preserved in rural journals often describe this phase as the hour when the night begins to loosen its grip, even though darkness still dominates. You sense that quiet transition without needing to name it. Your body remains heavy and settled, yet there is a subtle lightness beneath that weight. Muscles stay relaxed but not inert. They feel ready in a distant, dormant way, like earth before dawn, that has not yet warmed but already holds promise. Your breathing remains slow, steady, unremarkable. Each breath arrives and leaves without effort. The rhythm feels self-sustaining, as if it no longer depends on attention at all. You could observe it if you wished, but there is no pull to do so. The air around you feels unchanged, still and even. There is no noticeable draft, no shift in temperature. It simply holds its balance. This quiet steadiness allows your awareness to sink further inward, where sensations blur into a soft continuity. Writings from homesteaders sometimes mention that this part of the night felt strangely peaceful, as though the world itself were resting between thoughts. You recognize that feeling now, a sense of suspension that feels neither active nor asleep, but something in between. Your thoughts appear only as faint impressions, like distant reflections on water. They do not form stories. They fade before becoming distinct. You do not follow them. You let them pass as naturally as breath. The sense of space around you has grown indistinct. You no longer perceive the cabin as a structure. Instead, there is a generalized feeling of enclosure, a gentle boundary that supports rather than contains. Your body feels perfectly balanced where it lies. No area draws attention. No adjustment is needed. This stillness feels complete, as though every small correction has already been made. Some observers of everyday life in earlier centuries wrote that people trusted this part of the night, deeply believing it to be the most renewing. You can feel why. There is a quiet confidence in how rest settles now, unforced and steady. The rhythm of your heartbeat continues soft and even barely perceptible. It blends with your breathing so completely that the two feel like one continuous motion. The darkness behind your closed eyes feels smooth and uninterrupted. There are no flashes or shifts, only a consistent depth. It does not feel empty. It feels full in a calm, untroubled way. You may sense a gentle inward pull, as if your awareness is folding in on itself. Not shrinking, but simplifying. Layers of attention fall away one by one, leaving something very quiet at the center. A faint warmth lingers throughout your body, not concentrated anywhere, just present. It does not change. It reassures without drawing notice. Historical reflections on daily rhythms often suggest that this stage of rest was rarely remembered. Upon waking, yet deeply restorative. You're moving through that kind of moment now, one that leaves no sharp memory, but shapes how rested you will feel. Your breathing slows imperceptibly again. The pause after each exhale lengthens, comfortable and unstrained. There is no sense of holding or waiting, only gentle continuation. The night around you feels settled into its deepest calm. Any remaining motion exists too far away to matter. The world seems to have agreed to wait. Your sense of self grows lighter, more diffuse. You're still present, but less defined. Awareness floats without edges, without focus. Nothing calls for attention. Nothing presses forward. Even the idea of listening fades. You rest in a quiet that feels complete in itself, self-sustaining and steady. It does not ask you to go anywhere or do anything. Time loses its shape entirely. There's only duration without measure, a soft continuity that carries you forward. In this state, sleep is no longer something you approach. It is something you are already within, deep and gentle, and so you remain here suspended in a calm that feels ancient and familiar, held by warmth, stillness, and the slow, patient rhythm of the night as it continues on its way. A barely noticeable shift passes through your awareness like a ripple far beneath the surface of still water. It does not wake you, nor does it pull you upward. Instead, it settles you more deeply into the quiet you're already inhabiting. The night feels mature now, fully settled into itself. The air around you remains calm and even. It carries no urgency, no message. It simply exists steady and patient. You sense it more as presence than sensation, a kind of atmospheric reassurance that nothing needs attention. Accounts preserved in household records often suggest that this portion of the night was when homes felt most stable, when fires had long since softened, and the world outside had reached its deepest pause. You sense that stability now like a wide, unmoving foundation beneath everything. Your body lies fully at rest. There's no remaining tension to release, no adjustment waiting to be made. Muscles rest in their natural alignment, supported and quiet. Even the subtle awareness of posture has faded. Your breathing continues at an unhurried pace. Each breath blends into the next without effort or interruption. The pauses between them feel gentle and unremarkable, as though time itself has slowed to match your rhythm. The warmth surrounding you remains constant. It neither grows nor fades. It simply holds a steady envelope that makes movement unnecessary. You're not warm or cool so much as balanced. Some writers who studied everyday life in earlier centuries remarked that nights often carried a sense of suspension, as though the world were briefly held in place. You experience that suspension now, a calm hovering that asks nothing of you. Your awareness feels diffused, spread evenly rather than focused. You're not thinking in words or images. What remains is a soft field of sensation, barely defined, gently present. The idea of the room fades further. Walls and boundaries no longer register. What remains is a sense of being contained without enclosure, supported without pressure. You may sense a faint internal rhythm, steady and quiet, that seems to carry you along. Whether it is breath or heartbeat hardly matters. It feels unified, a single pulse underlying everything. Some historical interpretation suggests that this depth of rest was common before artificial light shortened nights and compressed sleep. You sense that older rhythm now slow and expansive, allowing rest to deepen without interruption. Your thoughts do not return. Instead, there is only a soft awareness that occasionally brightens and then dims again. Nothing demands focus. Nothing lingers. The darkness behind your closed eyes feels smooth and continuous. There are no flickers or changes. It feels like a calm surface that gently absorbs attention. Your body feels heavier in the most comfortable way, as if gently weighted into place. At the same time, there is a subtle feeling of floating, of being supported from all sides. The contrast between weight and lightness feels natural, unremarkable. You accept it without reflection. Some domestic notes from earlier centuries describe how people trusted this part of the night to do its work quietly without interference. You're doing the same now, allowing rest to unfold on its own terms. Your breathing remains slow and even. Each cycle seems to complete itself perfectly. There is no sense of anticipation or conclusion. Time has little meaning here. There is no counting, no sense of progress. Only continuity, smooth and uninterrupted. Your awareness becomes increasingly diffuse, as though spreading outward and thinning at the edges. You're still present, but less defined. The silence feels layered and deep, like a soft fabric wrapped around everything. It does not press. It simply surrounds. Any remaining sense of effort dissolves. Even the idea of letting go fades, replaced by a quiet acceptance that nothing needs to happen. You rest in this state, effortlessly held by warmth, steadiness, and the slow rhythm of the night. The world beyond feels distant and irrelevant. There is only this calm interior space, steady and unchanging. Your breathing and heartbeat continue quietly, almost imperceptible. They blend into the background of awareness until they are no longer distinct. You're no longer moving towards sleep. You're fully within it, resting in its deeper layers. And in this depth where sensation softens and thought disappears, you remain suspended in a peaceful stillness carried gently by the long, unbroken calm of the night. A faint shift occurs somewhere beneath your awareness, not enough to wake you, only enough to remind you that time is still moving in its quiet way. The night does not change direction, but it deepens, settling into a slower, heavier calm that feels almost timeless. Your body remains completely at rest. There is no urge to move, no signal asking for adjustment. Muscles stay loose, supported, content to remain as they are. The surface beneath you feels steady and dependable, neither firm nor soft in any noticeable way, simply present. Writings from early rural households sometimes describe this stretch of night as the point when sleep felt most complete, when even dreams became sparse and gentle. You seem to be resting in that same depth now, where awareness thins to a quiet hum beneath consciousness. Your breathing continues in an unbroken rhythm, smooth and shallow. Each breath flows into the next without pause or effort. The space between breaths feels wide and calm, like a held silence that does not need to be filled. The air around you remains still. There's no sense of movement or disturbance. It feels as though the entire space has agreed to remain quiet together, holding a shared stillness that supports rest. Your sense of form softens further. The outline of your body becomes less distinct in your awareness. Instead of edges, there is only a general feeling of presence, gentle and diffuse. Some accounts from earlier centuries describe sleep as a kind of sinking or settling, not into darkness but into quiet. You experience that sensation now, a gradual easing downward into deeper rest without effort or intention. The darkness behind your closed eyes feels consistent and smooth. It does not shift or pulse. It simply exists as a calm backdrop, neither empty nor active. Any remaining thoughts appear only as vague impressions lacking shape or direction. They dissolve almost immediately like breath on cool glass. You do not try to hold on to them. The warmth around you feels stable and balanced. It does not draw attention to itself. It simply supports quietly, maintaining comfort without change. Your awareness grows more diffuse, spreading thinly across sensation, rather than concentrating in any one place. You're still here but lightly, so as though awareness itself has softened. The night outside feels very far away now, not in distance but in relevance. Whatever happens beyond this space no longer concerns you. The world has narrowed to rest alone. Some observers of pre-industrial life wrote that this stage of sleep felt like being suspended between states neither fully dreaming nor fully awake. You inhabit that suspension, now held gently in its center. Your heartbeat continues its slow, steady rhythm. You sense it faintly, then forget it again. It is simply part of the background hum of being. There is no desire to change position or adjust your surroundings. Everything feels complete as it is. Even the concept of comfort feels unnecessary, because nothing feels uncomfortable. The quiet thickens, becoming almost tangible. It wraps around you without pressure, like a soft layer of air that supports rather than confines. Your awareness continues to thin, drifting farther from distinct sensation. What remains is a calm, even presence, untroubled and steady. Time seems to lose its sequence. There is no before or after, only this ongoing stillness. Moments blend together without edges. Your breathing remains slow and effortless. Each breath flows naturally, as though guided by something deeper than conscious thought. The sense of self grows lighter, more diffuse. You're still aware, but the boundaries that define you feel less firm, less important. There is a quiet reassurance in this state, a feeling that nothing needs to happen, and nothing is missing. Everything is as it should be. You rest within this deep calm, suspended between awareness and sleep, held by the gentle continuity of the night. The stillness continues without interruption, smooth and unbroken. You remain there, settled and at ease, drifting peacefully within the long quiet stretch of rest. A gentle shift passes through the night, so subtle it feels more like a change in texture than in time. You do not wake, but something in your awareness loosens again. as if another layer has quietly fallen away. The calm you rest within grows smoother, deeper, more continuous. Long ago, people living in rural cabins often spoke of the hours before dawn as the most settled part of the night. Diaries and farm journals suggest that this was when disturbances were least likely, when even animals seemed to pause in their movements. You sense that same still interval now wide and unbroken. Your body remains completely at ease. There is no tension left to release, no position to improve. Every part of you feels settled into exactly the right place. The bed beneath you no longer registers as a surface. It feels more like a steady presence holding without effort. Your breathing continues in a slow, unhurried rhythm. Each inhale arrives quietly. Each exhale fades just as gently. The pauses between them feel natural, unforced, as though time itself is breathing with you. The air around you feels neutral and calm. It neither cools nor warms. It simply exists balanced and still. That steadiness supports your rest without drawing attention to itself. Some accounts from early settlers describe this part of the night as the hour when even thoughts seem to sleep. You understand that description now. Your mind holds no clear images, no narratives, only a soft openness, where ideas briefly appear and then dissolve. Your sense of the room has nearly vanished. Wall, ceiling, and distance no longer register as shapes. Instead, there is only a general sense of being gently enclosed, safely held in a quiet space. The darkness behind your closed eyes feels smooth and uniform, like a deep fabric with no seams. There is no movement there, no flicker, only a calm depth that absorbs attention rather than pulling at it. Some later historical interpretations suggest that this phase of rest allowed the body to recover without interruption, especially during long winter nights. You feel that restoration happening quietly without effort or awareness. Your heartbeat continues its slow, reliable rhythm, barely noticeable unless you turn toward it. It feels steady and reassuring, a quiet marker of continuity. The warmth around you remains even and consistent. There are no cool edges or shifting patches. Everything feels balanced, stable, and complete. Your awareness grows more diffuse, spreading outward and thinning at the same time. You're present but not focused. Consciousness feels wide and gentle, like a soft field rather than a point. Occasionally a faint impression passes through your mind, not quite a thought, not quite an image. It leaves no trace. There's no need to follow it or name it. Some household notes from the past describe this stage of night as one where people felt settled into themselves, no longer alert, not yet dreaming. You inhabit that same quiet middle now. The passage of time has lost definition. Minutes and moments blend together. There is no sense of waiting or moving forward. Everything feels suspended in a steady calm. Your breathing and heartbeat seem to merge into a single gentle rhythm. It is not something you control or monitor. It simply continues steady and reliable. The quiet around you thickens slightly, becoming almost tangible. It wraps around your awareness like a soft layer insulating you from any disturbance. Your body feels both heavy and light at once, grounded yet floating. This balance feels natural, as though you have settled into the exact point where effort disappears. The world outside feels very distant now, not separated by space but by relevance. Nothing beyond this calm interior matters in this moment. Some historians writing about everyday life in earlier centuries noted that such deep rest often went unremarked upon, even though it sustained people through demanding days. You're experiencing that quiet support now. Your awareness thins further, becoming almost transparent. Sensation fades into a gentle background hum. There is no desire to think, to move, or to listen. Everything necessary is already happening on its own. You rest in a deep, even stillness where time feels suspended and awareness softened. The night holds you without effort or demand. And in this sustained calm, with breath slow and body settled, you remain drifting gently within the deep interior of sleep, carried forward by the quiet, unbroken rhythm of the dark. A barely perceptible change begins to ripple through the quiet, not enough to wake you, only enough to suggest that time is continuing its slow movement forward. The stillness you rest in does not break. It simply shifts its texture, becoming slightly lighter, as if the night has turned a page without making a sound. In writings left by early settlers, there are occasional mentions of this late stretch. Before dawn, described as the calmest part of the night when even the most restless sleepers lay still. It was considered a kind of deep pause, a holding space before the world began to stir again. You seem to be resting within that same pause now. Your body remains deeply relaxed. There is no tension left to release, no signal asking for adjustment. The muscles lie quiet and loose, supported without effort. Your posture feels settled in a way that does not invite change. Your breathing continues at a slow, even pace. Each breath flows gently, almost imperceptibly, as if it belongs more to the rhythm of the room than to you. The pause between breaths feels natural and unremarkable, simply part of the ongoing calm. The warmth around you remains constant. It neither grows nor fades. It feels like a steady presence rather than a sensation, something dependable, that does not call attention to itself. Some commentators on early domestic life observed that this phase of night often felt detached from ordinary time, as though hours passed without being noticed. You experience that same detachment now. Time does not advance or recede. It simply exists somewhere beyond awareness. Your sense of self grows lighter still. You're aware of being, but not of doing. There's no urge to think or respond. Awareness floats gently without shape or direction. The darkness behind your closed eyes remains smooth and even. It does not flicker or change. It feels like depth without distance, a calm feel that holds everything softly. A faint internal rhythm continues steady and reassuring. Whether it is breath or heartbeat hardly matters. It blends into the background of stillness, supporting everything without demanding notice. The space around you feels wide and open, yet also protective. Boundaries are implied rather than defined. You feel held without feeling confined. Some historical reflection suggests that people once trusted this part of the night as a time of true restoration, when body and mind quietly repaired themselves. You're resting within that same restorative span now, without effort or intention. Your awareness thins further, becoming almost transparent. Sensations soften to the point of abstraction. Warmth, stillness, and quiet merge into a single gentle presence. You no longer track where you are or how you are positioned. Those details have lost importance. What remains is a simple sense of being supported and at ease. The outside world feels very distant, not in space, but in relevance. Nothing beyond this moment presses in. Nothing asks for attention. Your breathing continues its slow, even rhythm, steady and unremarkable. Each breath flows into the next without pause or emphasis. The calm around you deepens once more, like a lake settling after the faintest ripple. Everything feels smooth, continuous, and unbroken. You may sense a faint inward, drifting, a gentle pull toward deeper rest. It does not feel like movement so much as easing into a quieter layer. Some later historians writing about sleep patterns suggested that this phase was rarely remembered, even though it played a central role in restoration. You are within that forgotten depth now, where awareness softens almost completely. Your thoughts, if they appear at all, dissolve before forming. There is no narrative, no image, only a soft, undirected awareness. The feeling of time loosens further. Moments no longer follow one another clearly. They blend into a steady, unmeasured flow. Your body feels perfectly content, neither heavy nor light, simply at rest. The sense of effort has vanished entirely. You remain suspended in this calm wrapped in quiet and steadiness. The night holds its shape around you, unchanging and patient. As you drift here, awareness fading into a gentle background hum, you remain carried by the deep unbroken stillness, moving effortlessly toward the quietest part of rest, where even thought dissolves into calm. A final soft shift passes through your awareness, so subtle, it feels more like a deepening than a change. The night has reached its quietest balance, a point where nothing presses forward and nothing pulls away. You're resting inside that balance, now held gently by the slow rhythm of everything around you. Long ago, people living close to the land often spoke of this hour as the most complete part of rest. Notes preserved in letters and household reflections describe it as the moment when the world seemed to breathe in unison. You sense that harmony now, a quiet alignment between body space and time. Your breathing has become almost invisible to you. It continues steadily, but without any conscious awareness. Each breath blends seamlessly into the next, creating a smooth, uninterrupted flow. There is no effort involved, no decision required. Your body feels deeply settled, as if it has found its natural resting shape. Muscles remain loose and supported. There is no impulse to move, no discomfort asking to be addressed. Everything feels resolved for the moment. The warmth surrounding you is steady and neutral. It does not fluctuate or draw attention. It simply exists as a quiet layer of comfort holding you in place. You no longer notice where warmth begins or ends. The sense of space around you is softened almost completely. You do not perceive walls or distance. Instead, there is a gentle impression of being contained within something calm and protective, a quiet enclosure without edges. Some reflections from earlier centuries suggest that this stage of rest was considered the most nourishing, even if people rarely remembered it. You're experiencing that nourishment now quietly and without effort. Your awareness has thinned to a faint glow like a low ember beneath ash. It is present, but barely. Sensations come and go without form. Thoughts no longer organize themselves into language. Time has lost its structure. There is no before or after, no anticipation or recall. There is only the ongoing continuity of rest unfolding without interruption. The outside world feels immeasurably distant. Whatever happens beyond this moment no longer matters. Even the idea of separation between inside and outside fades away. Your heartbeat continues its slow, steady rhythm, barely noticeable. It feels less like a sound and more like a quiet assurance that everything is in order. The darkness behind your closed eyes is smooth and deep without movement or contrast. It does not invite attention, it simply holds space. Your sense of self becomes lighter, less defined. You're still present, but softly, so like a thought halfway remembered. Awareness floats without edges or weight. Some historians who studied everyday life have remarked that such deep rest was once an ordinary part of the night taken for granted and rarely described. You're resting in that same depth now where nothing needs to be named. Your breathing, your warmth, your stillness all merge into one continuous experience. There is no separation between body and rest, between awareness and quiet. Everything feels complete. There is no anticipation of waking, no need to move forward. The moment sustains itself. You remain suspended in this calm, carried gently by the slow rhythm that has guided you all night. The quiet holds steady, unbroken, and patient. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to consider. Even the idea of effort has dissolved. You rest fully, now settled into the deepest part of the night where awareness softens into silence, and silence into rest. And as this calm continues, unhurried and complete, you drift onward within it, supported by warmth, stillness, and the enduring quiet that carries you safely through the final hours before morning. Now, without needing to change anything, allow the quiet you're resting in to soften just a little more. You don't have to go anywhere or do anything at all. Just notice how gentle everything feels. Your breathing continues on its own, slow and steady like a calm tide moving in and out. The night around you feels stable and kind. Nothing presses, nothing interrupts. You're safe to let go completely. The world can wait while you rest here wrapped in warmth and stillness. If any last thoughts drift by, let them pass without holding them. They do not need answers. They can float through like clouds and fade on their own. There is no need to follow them. Feel how your body rests naturally, how the surface beneath you supports every part without effort. Notice the ease in your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. Each place that once held tension now feels loose and quiet. The air around you remains calm and even. Each breath flows gently without thought or control. You do not need to listen for it. It simply happens steady and reassuring. You may feel as though you're sinking slightly or floating or simply resting in place. Any of these sensations are welcome. They are signs of deep rest settling in. The night holds you softly like a long pause between thoughts. There's nothing to prepare for and nowhere to go. This moment is complete just as it is. As you rest here, allow yourself to drift even further into comfort. Let awareness fade to a faint glow, then softer still. Let the quiet carry you. Sleep can deepen now naturally and gently without effort. You are safe, you are settled, and you're allowed to rest as long as you need. Sweet dreams!